Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. It was the summer of 2000, July 1st. My dad's granddaughters were playing in my room when suddenly they came running downstairs, screaming and crying. "There's a man on a bike in your mirror," they sobbed. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" But they insisted there was a man, clear as day, riding a bike inside my mirror. Curious, I went upstairs to check. The girls refused to go back into my room, so I stepped in alone. And then I saw him. A man on a bike, reflected in my mirror. I blinked, shook my head, turned away for a split second. Gone. My heart pounded as I stepped back, ready to leave, but something made me turn around one last time. That's when I saw him. My uncle. He looked so real, walking toward me, except the back of his body was fading, like a ghost dissolving into air. He sat down on my bed and looked right at me. "Sammy Joe, come here. I need to tell you something important." I backed into my closet, frozen in fear. I wanted to believe it was really him, my Uncle Joey, the one I was so close to when he was alive. But this wasn't normal. This wasn't right. "No," I whispered. "Go away." He looked at me, sadness in his eyes. "I need to tell you. Go away." A heavy silence filled the room. Then, in a soft voice, he said, "Fine. I love you, Sammy Joe." And just like that, he was gone. Tears were running down my face as I ran to find my brother. I told him what I had just seen, but he didn't believe me. My mom was concerned when I told her later, but she chalked it up to grief. "You just missed him," she said. "It's all in your head." 3 days later, on the 4th of July, we were at a family barbecue. My cousins, brothers, and nieces decided to wander into the woods, and I went with them. It was a long walk, and the summer heat pressed down on us. When we reached a canal, I suddenly felt dizzy, lightheaded. I stopped, drank some water, and shook it off. We walked further, deeper into the woods. At the next canal, the same thing happened. Dizziness, nausea, like something was pressing on me. By the time we reached the third canal, I was so sick I could barely stand. My stomach twisted, my head pounded. That's when I realized I was only getting sick at the canals. Something wasn't right. I turned back. When we got to my cousin's house, I felt perfectly fine again, like nothing had happened. We were just about to eat when my dad's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then quietly said, "Let's go inside." My mom frowned. "No." "What is it?" "Let's go inside," he repeated, his voice tight. "Just tell me," she insisted. He took a deep breath, looked at her, and said the words that made the whole world go silent. "I'm sorry, but your dad died." I felt my stomach drop. My mom took off crying. Everyone just stood there in shock. I forced myself to step forward. "How did Grandpa die?" I asked. My dad hesitated, then looked at me. "He had a heart attack and drowned," he said, "in a canal." A chill ran through me. I turned to my brother, my voice shaking. "I knew something was wrong," I whispered. "Uncle Joey came to warn me 3 days ago and I didn't listen. And today, I kept getting sick at every canal we passed." We both sat there, silent, overwhelmed by the eerie truth of it all. Since that day, whenever I see Uncle Joey, no matter how scared I am, I listen. Some people don't believe me. Some think I'm crazy. But I know the truth. It's a gift, and I'll never ignore it again. It was 2:30 a.m. when I got a nosebleed. A bad one. For nearly 30 minutes, I sat there pressing tissues against my nose, watching the clock tick closer to 3:00 a.m., the hour when spirits are said to be most active. I told myself not to overthink it, just go to sleep. But as soon as I lay down, I heard footsteps. coming into my room. I sighed. David. Great. David was a presence I had grown accustomed to. I just hoped he wouldn't distract me tonight. Please search for the light, I muttered, reminding him of the deadline he had promised. Then I closed my eyes. I drifted into a strange dream. I was floating down the staircase, moving agonizingly slow. But I was lucid. I knew I was dreaming. Next thing I knew, I was at the bottom of the stairs near the basement. That's when my friend and his friend appeared, peeking around the corner. I see people I know in my dreams all the time, but this was different. My friend's face was crystal clear. Then, out of nowhere, he hugged me. A deep, tight bear hug. And I felt myself slipping away, waking up. But something was wrong. I wasn't fully awake, yet I wasn't dreaming anymore either. Random images from my dream clung to my reality. A copy machine, sitting in my room. Strange pictures on my walls that shouldn't have been there. My entire body tingled, and a low humming filled my ears. Was this sleep paralysis? No, I could move. Shaking it off, I got up, took a drink of water, and tried to sleep again. That's when I heard them. Footsteps. This time, outside my room, pacing the hallway, like someone patrolling. Then the faint jingle of keys. Occasionally, the footsteps bumped into my swivel chair, making it creak. I listened tense, but I wasn't scared. Not until something cold poked my face. Not just once. Again and again. It didn't feel entirely real, but it didn't feel fake either. The footsteps were still in the hallway, but something else was in my room. Flustered, I tried to sleep again. I managed about 10 minutes. Then I woke up. And that was the worst part. Sleep paralysis hit me like a weight pressing down on my chest. My ribs ached like something was crushing them. I tried to relax, but every time I did, the pressure got worse. I knew what sleep paralysis was. My brain had disconnected from my body. But this hurt. Finally, I forced myself to move, a tiny wiggle of my finger, clenching my muscles. Slowly, the pressure lifted, but my ribs were sore long after. An hour later, it was morning. I started my day, but the eerie feeling lingered. Update on David. I had given David a deadline, to move on, to find peace to leave. But if there were truly two ghosts, how could I know if he was gone? To help, I prayed for an angel to guide him to the light. I just hoped it worked. Yet, something still lingers. Not David, not the presence in the hallway, but the poke. It's still here. Maybe Poke is a new ghost, or maybe David never really left. My family bought a middle-class home in Arvada, Colorado in the mid-1970s. For years, the house was completely normal. No strange activity, nothing unusual. That all changed in the mid-1980s when my sister and I became teenagers. That was also when our parents divorced and when my sister and I got interested in Ouija boards. One summer night in 1985, we invited some friends over to see if the Ouija board was just a game or something more. We assumed that the only way it would move was if one of us pushed it. None of us really believed it would work. At first, nothing happened. We were about to give up. Most of us stood up, ready to walk away, when suddenly, the pointer moved on its own. My sister's friend was the only one still sitting at the board. She let out a loud scream, telling us to come back before it stopped. We sat back down, and suddenly, we were getting all kinds of responses. That same friend started asking ridiculous, almost taunting questions, trying to make it mad, maybe. Then she asked one final question. If you're real, prove it. Rape me tonight. None of us really believed it was real. That night, as she walked home from our house, something, or someone, jumped out of the bushes and threw her to the ground. It held her down, tore her clothes, and raped her. The next morning, we woke up to a phone call. She was in the hospital. She had been beaten nearly to death. The doctors did a rape kit but found no evidence of a typical assault. There was no DNA, no signs of a normal attack. They couldn't explain it. The only thing she ever told us about what happened was that it wasn't a person. It was a figure, faceless, shapeless. From that night on, strange things happened in our house every single day until we moved, 8 years later. But here's the weirdest part. We've talked to the people who live there now. They haven't experienced a single thing. Not one. Like whatever it was only there for us. I've never been able to explain that. The sound of my old Ford rumbled so loudly it nearly drowned out the radio as I rattled down the dirt roads leading away from my home in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was headed to a ranch on the outskirts of Grover, Colorado. My 2 cow dogs rode beside me, unusually alert, their eyes darting to every window of the old ranch truck. This was my first weekend staying at my boyfriend's place since we had started dating, and I was equal parts excited and nervous. After driving for over an hour, the narrow dirt road finally dipped down into a meadow, revealing a white, 2-story farmhouse. It stood tall among the bunny trees, looking like something straight out of a horror movie. A rusty old windmill creaked in the breeze, adding to the eerie feeling that settled over me. But as soon as I stepped out of the truck, that uneasy chill vanished. I ushered my dogs inside, where my boyfriend and his friends were gathered in the kitchen, playing cards and finishing up supper. The night was filled with laughter, stories, and good company. When the last of our friends left, we finally went to bed. I was exhausted but couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was startled awake by my little border Aussie mix barking sharply. 3 loud, urgent barks. Half asleep, I mumbled for her to lie down. She obeyed, but a low, steady growl rumbled in her throat. My boyfriend slept through the whole thing, and before long, I drifted back to sleep. That's when the dream started. In the dream, I stepped out of the bedroom and into the living room. Sitting there in a chair was an older man. He was large, but his body showed signs of illness. His eyes were deep and sunken, his hands rough and calloused. His clothes were simple, neatly pressed, the way a cattleman's would be. He looked right at me, his face blank, unreadable. The next morning, I couldn't shake the strange feeling the dream had left me with. As my boyfriend and I went about the morning chores, I casually asked who had lived in the house before him. He told me it had been his grandfather's. He had passed away years ago, right there in the living room, in his chair, the same blue chair I had seen in my dream. My eyes went wide as I hurriedly told him every detail. He just shrugged and said he's still around to keep an eye on the place. Over the next few months, odd things kept happening. Unexplained noises, shifting shadows, objects moving from one place to another. My dream kept returning too. At first, the dogs still growled at unseen things in the night, but eventually, they settled. In time, we all came to accept that Grandpa was simply watching over his home. Anyone who has been to the Pawnee grasslands in northeastern Colorado knows the feeling. There's sorrow in the land, a weight that lingers, but there's also strength, the memory of the men and women who fought to survive here, who gave their lives to this unforgiving place. For some, the dream is to leave the bluffs behind, but for others, like Grandpa, the land holds them forever. As I look across the corals, past the vast meadows, toward the Pawnee Bluffs glowing beneath a pastel Midwest sunset, I can't blame him for wanting to stay. This story takes place in the house I still live in today. At the time, I was in my early teens, and things at home weren't going well. There was a lot of tension and fighting, which I think brought a lot of negative energy into the house. It was the hardest period for my family, and I honestly believe that this negativity somehow attracted the strange things that began to happen. I'm sharing these experiences now because I feel they might help explain what we went through. At this point, I had already seen a lot of shadow people and dark figures walking around the upstairs of our house. Oddly enough, I seemed to be the only one who could see them. However, my little brother would hear them, footsteps and strange sounds, which helped me feel like I wasn't just imagining things. Besides the shadowy figures and hearing footsteps in the hallway at night, things were still pretty normal. But there was one important detail I need to mention. My closet had a panel in the ceiling, leading up to the attic. That was the only way into the attic in our house. The strange happenings remained at that level for a while until I started researching paranormal activity. I watched a few ghost hunting shows, and from what I saw, I came to the conclusion that maybe these spirits were just restless and didn't mean any harm. I figured I'd try to ignore them and not interact, hoping they'd leave me alone. But as the situation at home got worse, the activity grew more intense. The spirits started making their presence known at night, scratching sounds and tapping noises from outside my window and on the roof. At first, I thought it might just be squirrels or something similar, but the sounds eventually moved from the roof to the attic. Still, I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. Then, one night, everything changed. I woke up around 2:00 a.m. to my bed shaking. At first, I thought it was my mom or brother trying to wake me up, but when I looked around, nobody was there. Then, my bed jerked again, but this time it felt like someone had pushed it with a lot of force. That freaked me out, so I quickly lay back down, pretending to be asleep until I eventually dozed off again. Later, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway outside my room, followed by a tap on my door and the sound of the doorknob shaking gently. This made me uncomfortable, especially after seeing the shadow figures. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was might be trying to get into my room. But one night, the experience took a terrifying turn. I had fallen asleep on my back, something I don't do anymore after this experience, since I've heard it can lead to nightmares. Around 2:40 a.m., I suddenly woke up. I checked my phone and was about to roll over when I heard scratching sounds above me, right in the attic, above my bed. I couldn't ignore it anymore, so out of curiosity, I knocked 3 times on the wall. The scratching grew louder, and whatever was up there began pacing around. A chill ran down my spine, and the atmosphere in the room instantly shifted. It felt darker, like something had changed. Suddenly, I heard thumping noises coming from the ceiling above me, near the panel in my closet. I tried to sit up and look, but it felt like a heavy weight was on top of me, pinning me to the bed. I could barely move my head. The panic started to rise in my chest. Then I heard the ceiling panel in my closet slide out of place and drop. The sound of wooden beams creaking in the attic echoed through my room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told myself it wasn't real, but then I heard my clothes in the closet moving around, hangers clicking together, like someone was climbing down into the closet from the attic. That's when the doorknob started violently shaking. Scratching sounds came from behind the door, and I thought whatever it was about to break through. I couldn't move, couldn't yell for my parents. No sound would come out. I was terrified, sure I was about to face something horrible. In that moment, I silently prayed, hoping whatever it was would just leave and not hurt me. The instant I finished praying, everything went silent. For about 20 seconds, nothing happened. I could still hear the clothes moving around, but this time it sounded like whatever was there was climbing back up into the attic. I heard the ceiling panel slide back into place, and the scratching moved to the far corner of the attic, fading away. As the sound stopped, the room seemed to lighten up. The heavy feeling in the air lifted, and the oppressive energy vanished. Since then, I've had other strange experiences in that house, though nothing has been as frightening as that night. Some of the things I've experienced could be explained as sleep paralysis, but I wasn't paralyzed when I woke up. The paralysis only seemed to happen after the heavy energy filled the room, which was well after I had woken up. Whether it was sleep paralysis or something truly paranormal, that night left an impression on me. I still remember it clearly, and it's an experience I'll never forget. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I want to share a strange story that happened in my girlfriend's dorm at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. It's mostly about her and her roommates, but I hope they're okay with me telling it. They've had some really odd experiences, and it all started around Halloween. One night, after a group of them had been out together, they came back to their room and found something unsettling. There was a drop of blood inside one of their candles. The thing is, To get into their dorm, you need a student ID and a PIN, so no one else could have entered. That same time, my girlfriend went into the bathroom to grab a broom. She swears it was just standing there, completely upright by itself. No wall or anything for it to lean on. It was as if some invisible force had placed it there. For a while, things quieted down. But then, as the new semester started, things got worse. My girlfriend was in her room when she saw her bag get dragged across the floor. There was no one around. No explanation. It was like something unseen was pulling it. And that wasn't the only thing. There were odd sounds, too. Footsteps when no one was there. Voices in the hall. And then there was a strange rumbling sound. It would start near the vent, but then it would seem to come from another corner, then another room. It was really hard to explain, but it was unsettling. There was also something strange with a stuffed kangaroo they kept in the room. One night, my girlfriend was sleeping in the other room. I kind of shoved her out of bed while I was asleep. And when she woke up, she found the kangaroo sitting on the floor, staring right at her. But what was really weird was how it got there. It was dragged across the room, and it had fallen in that position, its little beady eyes looking directly up at her. That wasn't the only time the kangaroo acted strange. Another time, it somehow crossed the room, climbed a chair, and turned around, facing the room like it was watching someone. But it wasn't just objects moving. There were dreams, odd, reoccurring dreams. One of the roommates had a terrifying dream where she was controlled by a dark, cloaked figure. In the dream, it forced her into strange, unnatural positions. It even picked up her phone and dialed her boyfriend's number. But whenever she tried to speak, her voice would fade away. A few weeks later, another roommate had a similar dream, waking up to describe the same figure standing at the foot of her bed. And another roommate had nightmares about a creepy little gremlin-like creature dancing around the dorm. What makes this even stranger is that other people who lived in the dorms around them, like the students above them and even some of the old roommates, reported having the same dreams even before my girlfriend and her roommates shared their experiences. The students above them had dreams of being pulled out of their beds and dragged toward the closet. As for physical stuff, there wasn't too much, but there were a few things that made us all uneasy. One of the roommates, the one who dreamed of the dark figure, woke up one morning with 3 parallel scratches across her arm. They were fresh, but she didn't know how they got there. I also woke up one night after crashing on their couch and found 2 identical scratches on my legs, in the same spot, the same length, and the same shape. They faded away after a day, right after I stepped out of the shower. And then there were the little things. Like when I'd lose something, I'd just ask, "Hey, could you give it back?" And then when I'd go to another room and come back, the item would be on a desk or a counter, as if it had just been placed there. All of this happened in her dorm, and it definitely left me wondering, do any of you have thoughts about it? Have you experienced something similar? I live in a condo, which is essentially a small apartment complex with separate entrances. In front of my building, there's a set of concrete steps that lead up to a wooden landing. From there, wooden stairs take you to the 2 units above mine, and another set leads down to the 2 units below. I live in the middle unit, right off the landing. Usually, I smoke on my balcony, but if it's late at night, I'll go out the front door instead, so I don't disturb my boyfriend or son. The sliding glass door to the balcony is old, heavy, and loud, so I try to avoid using it at night. One night around 4 a.m., I was sitting on the steps outside my door, just enjoying a cigarette. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like a small pebble hitting the landing above me. I looked around, but I didn't see anything, so I thought maybe the building had just settled. I finished my cigarette and went back inside. A few days later, it happened again. It was late at night, and I was out for my last smoke of the evening. This time, I heard another pebble hit one of the stairs above me. I walked over, and sure enough, there was a tiny rock on the second stair from the top. I couldn't explain how it got there. It felt like it had been tossed, but there was no one around. I was creeped out enough that I didn't go out there for another 2 months. The last time I went out there, it was around 3:30 a.m. I sat down on the top concrete step, smoking and reading Facebook posts on my phone. Then I heard the door handle to my condo start to turn. I assumed that my boyfriend or son had woken up, noticed I wasn't in, and were coming to find me. I stood up and peered around the corner, but no one came out, and the noise stopped. I looked back at my phone, trying to shake it off. A few seconds later, I heard the door handle rattling again. This time, I could actually see it turning back and forth. My heart started to race. I waited for the door to open, but it didn't. I stood there, staring at the handle, feeling more uneasy by the second. Then, just as I was about to turn around, the rattling suddenly stopped, and at the exact same moment, I heard two deep, raspy breaths right in my right ear. It sounded like whatever, or whoever, was standing just inches away from me, struggling to breathe. I bolted inside and found both my boyfriend and son sleeping in the living room, right where I left them. It didn't make sense. No one had come out. And what made it even stranger was that neither of my dogs barked. They always bark when someone approaches the door, but they didn't react at all. I tried to calm myself, sitting down on the couch to catch my breath. Just as my heart rate slowed, I glanced over at the door and froze again. I saw a shadow underneath the door. There's a half-inch gap where the weather stripping is missing, and through that gap, I saw what looked like someone's feet standing right outside, blocking the light from the stairwell. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, the shadow was gone. Since then, I haven't gone out there at night again. It felt like whatever it was wanted to get inside, but couldn't. It was so strange, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I've been thinking a lot about this experience, especially because I didn't really believe in hauntings until about a year ago. I started watching shows like Ghost Adventures and did some research, and that's when I began to open up to the idea of the paranormal. I wonder if that's why I'm having these experiences now. Do you think that once you start believing in this kind of thing, you're more likely to have these kinds of encounters? Do you think someone who has a paranormal experience is more likely to have others in the future? I really don't know what to make of it, but the stairwell, it feels off. I can't explain it, but I have this nagging feeling like something is still there. My cousin Norma and her husband had just moved into their first home. It was an exciting time for them, and I went over to help unpack and clean up. But the very moment I stepped inside, I felt a strange discomfort, like invisible eyes were watching my every move. The air felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I mentioned this to Norma, but she brushed it off with a smile. Once the boxes are unloaded and the house feels cozier, it'll be fine, she said. She assured me it was just the emptiness of the space making me feel uneasy. I decided to ignore it, convincing myself I was just overthinking. Weeks went by, and I hadn't thought much about that day until Norma called, asking to speak to my mom. After my mom got off the phone, she turned to me with a concerned expression and said there had been some sort of accident at Norma's house. She insisted we go over right away. When we arrived, the house was pitch black. There wasn't a single light on, and their car wasn't in the driveway. My mom banged on the door, calling out for Norma, but no one answered. It was strange. Norma and her husband lived only 10 minutes away, and it didn't seem like they'd leave without saying anything. After waiting a while, we decided to head back home. The next morning, my mom tried calling Norma again. This time, a woman answered the phone. When my mom asked if this was Norma's house and if Norma was home, the woman's response sent a chill down my spine. She said she had been living there for the past 15 years and asked if this was some kind of joke. My mom double-checked the phone number. It was the same number Norma had always used. Confused, I decided to try calling myself. The first 2 times, no one picked up. On the 3rd attempt, the same woman answered and told me I must have the wrong number. The whole thing felt surreal, and I couldn't make sense of it. About a week later, I ran into Norma at the supermarket. I immediately asked if her mother-in-law had moved in with her because every time I called, an older woman was answering the phone. Norma's face turned pale, and I could tell something was very wrong. She explained that she and her husband had left the house about 2 weeks earlier and were staying with her mother-in-law. The reason? The house was haunted. Norma described terrifying experiences that began shortly after they moved in. She had seen an old woman walking through the house, whispering to herself. The figure would disappear the moment Norma screamed. Late at night, she'd hear dishes clattering in the kitchen, or the sound of water running in the bathroom, as if someone were taking a shower. But no one else lived in the house except Norma and her husband. The situation had become so unbearable that Norma hired movers to collect their belongings, and they left the house for good. She told me she couldn't even bear to drive by the place anymore. After hearing her story, I couldn't stop thinking about the house. Occasionally, I'd pass by it on my way to run errands, and every time, an uneasy feeling would wash over me. The house seemed to radiate an eerie energy. Last I heard, another couple had moved in but quickly left, claiming they couldn't stand being there. Since then, the house has remained vacant. But sometimes, late at night, when I drive past, I see a faint light glowing in the attic. There's no one there, or at least, no one living, and every time I see that light, the chills run deeper. I grew up in southwest Colorado, where there's always been this strange feeling that something is around me, almost visible, but not quite. I'm not sure if it's because I grew up in the land of the Anasazi, where it feels like every house is built on a spot where the old ones lived and died. I've heard stories of skinwalkers and other eerie tales since I was young, so I'm no stranger to paranormal experiences. What I'm about to share is a true story of my own. When I was 16, I had my first undeniable experience. One night, I woke up to see a dark figure standing next to my bed. My first thought wasn't that it was a ghost or demon. I just thought someone had broken into my room. Then the figure moved closer. It was so dark that light didn't seem to touch it. When it was right next to me, it put its hand on my face, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I don't remember what happened after that. I would have thought I was crazy, but the next morning, my mother told me she had seen the same figure by her doorway. She was terrified and said it felt like an evil presence. She prayed to God until it went away. At that time, I was still a believer in God, following the Baptist faith. My mom removed any Native American items from our house, and our pastor blessed the home. Nothing happened after that until I turned 20. I had joined the Coast Guard and was stationed in Washington. I had been living in my apartment for just about a month when I woke up one night to see the same figure standing by my door. I reached for my knife, but as soon as my hand closed around the handle, I was paralyzed with fear. The figure then walked around my bed, laid down next to me, and put its arm around me. A few moments later, it got up and went to the window, where it simply faded away. About 2 months later, I moved into a new house with some friends from work. I only saw the figure once while they were there. It was the same overwhelming fear when I woke up, and this time, the figure was sitting on my windowsill. After that, I don't remember anything. One of my roommates moved out, and another went to the Persian Gulf for a year. Only one of them ever mentioned anything about ghosts, but all he would say was that the house was haunted. About 4 months after my last roommate left, the figure started appearing more frequently. It got to the point where I could hardly sleep. I would wake up at the slightest sound, figure-related or not. Let me tell you about some of the worst moments. One Saturday morning at 6:30, I know this because I reached over and grabbed my phone to check the time. I rolled back over, thinking I should get up and go for a run. That's when I heard 4 loud footsteps outside my room. I was facing the wall, so I turned over and reached for my pistol. I wasn't sure if it was the figure or a person, but I wasn't about to shoot the figure. Doubt it would help anyway. As I reached for the pistol, I felt the wave of fear wash over me and paralyze me. When I tried to move or yell, a sharp pain shot through my body. It wasn't like needles. It was like knives sticking into every inch of my skin. Just before I passed out, it all stopped, and I was able to get up. I didn't see the figure this time, maybe because it was getting a little light outside. The next bad experience happened at night. I woke up, feeling that familiar paralyzing fear. The figure was standing at the bottom left corner of my bed. I rolled over, grabbed my knife, and tried to crawl away, but it grabbed my leg and lifted both my legs into the air. I remember hearing it laugh, and then everything went blank. A few weeks later, I was talking on the phone with one of the few people I could talk to about these things when I heard a loud clunk upstairs. I went up to investigate, and that's when I found the word I had made on the heater vent by my bed. I know the wind didn't knock it off, and it didn't just fall on its own. It had fallen onto my dresser, and between the dresser and the floor, there was a large stack of books. Nothing much happened after that, just the usual feeling of fear and the sense of being watched, but no more paralysis. I decided to call a paranormal investigator. He told me that it was probably sleep paralysis, but he was also interested in the incidents with my mom, the ward, and the fact that these things never happened while I was on the water. I spend a lot of time on a ship, and he thought that might be worth noting. He suggested I write down everything I did the day before an experience to see if anything triggered it. Since I called him, nothing has happened. That was 5 months ago. This all made me think back to my childhood. I used to have night terrors and sleepwalk. My mom, dad, and brother told me they would wake up to find me standing over their beds, just staring at them. It really freaked them out. I even remember once seeing myself sleepwalking, standing outside my own body. I'm not sure if these events are connected, but I stopped sleepwalking when I was about 10 years old. Now, I'm 22, almost 23. "10 years ago, my husband, our 2 youngest daughters, and I moved into our home. It's not an old house. It's a modular we placed on our land. I don't think the house itself is the issue, but something about the land feels different. The strange things that happened here started off small, but over time, they grew unsettling, even a bit violent at times. Luckily, these events were spaced out, only happening once every few months, but they left us with more questions than answers. It all began when my daughters and I would be home alone at night. We'd feel something getting into bed with us. I could sense it, like the weight of someone or something lying beside me. And when I gathered the courage to turn over, there was nothing there. My daughters felt it too. One time, my oldest daughter was sure she heard me doing dishes in the kitchen at 3:00 a.m. She listened carefully, making sure it wasn't just her imagination. The sound was unmistakable, dishes clinking and water running. She walked out of her room, heading toward the kitchen, but when she got there, the light was on, yet there were no dishes being washed, and no water was running in the sink. As time went on, it seemed like whatever was haunting our home focused on my youngest daughter. Now, I know teenagers can sometimes be dramatic, but I believe her. Around 3 years after we moved in, things took a darker turn for her. Her bedroom door would open and close on its own, and she would hear strange, evil-sounding voices. One night, she even saw a shadow on her wall that looked demonic. There was one small safety measure my daughters took. They didn't have a lock on their bathroom door, so they'd open a drawer in their vanity and use it to block the door from being opened. One night, while my youngest was in the shower, she saw a dark figure through the shower curtain. Before she could react, the curtain lifted, and she felt something scratch her leg. When she looked down, she had 3 deep scratches on her inner thigh. Even now, 3 years later, the scars are still there. I used to comfort her, trying to find a logical explanation for what happened. But just a few months after that, something occurred that I couldn't explain at all. By then, my oldest daughter had moved out, and I was on the phone with her one evening while my youngest had just finished showering. My husband wasn't home, so it was just the 2 of us. While I was talking to my daughter, I looked up and saw my youngest standing in front of me. She had a towel wrapped around her and was shaking, her face pale. I thought she might be sick, so I asked her what was wrong. She just pointed toward the bathroom. I set the phone down and went to check on her, expecting to maybe deal with a spider or something else harmless. But when I walked in, there was nothing out of the ordinary. At least, not at first. My daughter could barely speak, but she managed to whisper, "Mom, look at the mirror." I turned and looked, and my heart nearly stopped. The mirror, fogged up from the shower, had a message written in the steam. It said, "Go away." The letters were fresh, like they had just been written in large, bold block letters. There was no explanation for it, nothing that made sense. I didn't have words to comfort her. I didn't know what to say, except that I didn't believe it was a ghostly presence. I believed it was something far worse, something demonic. I sat her down, trying to put my thoughts together. I told her the truth, what I really felt deep down. I told her I didn't believe in ghosts, but I did believe in demons, and I thought we were dealing with one here. A few weeks ago, I was sitting with my husband, just talking and enjoying each other's company. We'd been reflecting on how amazing the past year had been for us. My husband had received another raise at work. We were about to buy our first house, our daughter was turning one, and I had just come through a tough battle with depression that had weighed on me for years. We had also cut a toxic person out of our lives, and things had never felt better. It really felt like everything was falling into place. I remember telling him how everything had been so peaceful, almost too calm. I joked that nothing out of the ordinary had happened in a while, and we laughed about it. We wrapped up the conversation and went to bed, feeling happy and content. But the very next day, something happened that made me question everything. I was sitting on the couch, cuddling with my daughter, and staring at her toy bar in front of me. I had been looking directly at it when, out of nowhere, the toy bar moved. It wasn't a subtle shift. It moved like it had been bumped or pushed, just enough that I couldn't explain it. I thought maybe the cat had nudged it, but she was nowhere near. The toys were hanging freely, and nothing else in the room had shifted. I was left staring at it, completely unsure of what had just happened. I had no logical explanation for it. So, I guess I was wrong. Something was out of the ordinary. Whatever presence had been with me before, it was still there, making itself known again. Fast forward to now. We've moved into our new house, and things have been surprisingly calm. I'm usually pretty sensitive to the energy of a place, but in this new house, nothing really stood out. At least, nothing until about 10 minutes ago. I was sitting on the couch when, all of a sudden, I saw my daughter's swing move. It wasn't a gentle sway like it had caught the breeze. It moved suddenly, as if something had hit it. My first thought was to blame the cat, but I knew she was sleeping in the guest room at the other end of the house. Plus, that swing is heavy. There's no way it could have moved like that on its own. So now I'm left with this familiar, nagging confusion. I can't sense anything unusual around me. Maybe I've grown numb to it, since I used to try to turn it off for years. But these little events keep happening, and I'm still left wondering why. I don't feel afraid, but I do feel unsettled. It's not a threatening presence, but there's definitely something there. Most of the strange things that have happened seem to focus on me, not on my husband. These occurrences only happen when I'm alone or when he's around. Even after all these years, after a lifetime of premonitions, strange feelings, and unexplained events, I still can't shake the doubt in my mind. I wonder if I'm losing my sanity. Why is this happening? What does it mean? And most of all, why now? After so many years of living with these experiences, I can't help but feel that there's something trying to get my attention. It's not scary, but it's curious. Almost like it's been waiting for me to notice. I don't want it to stop or continue. I just want to understand it. I know this might sound a little whiny, but it's been a long time since I've been open about these things. And now that I'm finally comfortable sharing, it's hard not to question myself. But at least I don't feel as embarrassed anymore, especially when I can talk to others who might understand. Baby steps, right? So, if anyone has any advice or thoughts, I'd be grateful. I just want to know why this keeps happening. Why me? Hey everyone. I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I've been thinking about a few strange things that happened to me when I was younger, things that still leave me a bit confused and creeped out. I've never really been sure what to make of it, so I thought I'd share and see if anyone has any ideas. I was probably between 5 and 7 years old at the time, a point in my life when strange, supernatural things began to happen, although I didn't realize it until much later. We lived in a small, 4-bedroom ranch-style house, built in the 70s, in a neighborhood that used to be home to retired Air Force families. Most of the neighbors were older, military couples who had lived there for years. Our house wasn't big, but it was a good size for our family of 5. My dad worked a lot, and my mom stayed home with me and my 2 brothers. To help paint a picture of where these strange things happened, let me describe the layout of the house. When you first walked in the front door, there was a step up into the living room. It was a little larger than most houses because it had been converted from a garage, and it had a half bath. If you went straight, you'd find the kitchen and dining room. To the left of that, there was a small room and the laundry area with a back door. From the living room, a long hallway stretched to the bedrooms. About halfway down the hallway on the right, there was a bathroom, and at the very end, my room. When this started, I was always playing with my older brother, who was only a year older than me. My younger brother was still a baby, so he didn't really join in. One day, I was walking down the hallway on my way to my room when I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. I saw my older brother dart past one of the doorways. But here's the thing, he wasn't home. He was staying at my grandma's house. There was nobody else around who looked like him. From that moment on, it wasn't just a one-time thing. I kept seeing a figure that looked exactly like my brother, either darting past doorways or peeking down at me from the top of the hallway. It happened so often that I started to wonder what it was. My mom even took me to the eye doctor to make sure there wasn't something wrong with my vision. But the doctor said my eyes were perfectly fine. I had 20/20 vision. I never felt afraid of it, but I couldn't explain why it kept happening. And the figure didn't look exactly like my brother. It had a strange purplish-green tint to its skin, and its hair was dim and dull compared to my brother's usual black hair. It wasn't exactly scary, but it definitely made me uneasy. Eventually, it stopped, maybe after a few months, but I never saw it again after that. Then, something else happened that left me confused. I remember at night, when I was in bed, I would see lights turning on and off. The lamp by the half bath and the light in the bathroom itself would flicker on and off, even though no one was near them. It disturbed me enough that I told my dad about it. He came to check, but he didn't find anything wrong with the lights or the wiring. He didn't seem to believe me all that much, but he told me that if it ever happened again, I should say a little prayer in Jesus' name, and it would stop. To my surprise, when I tried it, the lights stopped flickering. It wasn't an explanation I could really understand, but it worked, and after a while, it stopped happening altogether. I don't know if there was some sort of power issue or if it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but the feeling of distress and dread I felt at the time was real. It felt like there was something watching me, or maybe something trying to get my attention. Then, a few years later, when I was around 12, I became really interested in the paranormal, thanks to my grandma. I'd tell everyone how badly I wanted to see a ghost. I'd watch all kinds of shows about it, reading up on everything I could, but after one particular experience, I changed my mind about wanting to see anything more. One day, I went to my room to lie down for a bit, possibly after a bad dream. I woke up feeling panicked, like something wasn't right. I felt this strange burning sensation on my back. I rushed to the bathroom, lifted my shirt, and looked in the mirror. That's when I saw it. 3 red scratch marks, faint but clear, running across my back. I was terrified. I had no idea what had caused it or how it happened. It felt so real, and I couldn't explain it. That moment was when I finally stopped wanting to see a ghost. I had enough of strange things happening, and after that, I kept those experiences to myself for a long time. But looking back on it, I still wonder what exactly happened. Our home is nestled at the foothills of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. It was built in the 1950s, but the land it sits on has a much older history. The property was once farmland that stretched for many acres into the surrounding neighborhood. Over the years, we've come to learn that the land has some interesting characteristics from its past. an old stone grill, the remains of a pit where the outhouse once stood, a water well, and even, underneath the large two-car garage, the remains of a liquor distillery from Prohibition. There are also numerous objects buried throughout our yard, like old glass bottles and metal relics from long ago. Since moving here 17 years ago, there have been many strange occurrences in our home. Most of them are subtle, unexplained sounds and little oddities that seem to come and go without warning. We've heard objects drop when nothing is around, conversations that are muffled and unintelligible, sink faucets turning on and off, and door handles jiggling as if someone were trying to get in. These are the strange sounds that have become almost part of the background, but the real experiences go much deeper. One of the most unsettling events happened many years ago when our landlord's daughter was showering in the smaller bathroom. She suddenly heard her recently deceased grandmother's voice calling her name. Naturally, she was startled, but she dismissed it, thinking it was her imagination. But was it? Who can say for sure? Then there was the time I was walking down our hallway, one that always gives me a creepy feeling, and I decided to hide in the doorway of a vacant room. That room holds an eerie history, as it's where one of our aunts passed away. As I stood there, I heard a male voice call out the name David. My heart raced, and I ran downstairs, too frightened to stay in that space for another second. Another strange occurrence happened to our dad. His bedroom is right next to the kitchen, and one night, he heard what sounded like my twin sister and I talking loudly in the kitchen. He got up to check, but when he did, the kitchen was empty, and both of us were sound asleep in our room. Another time, my twin sister was leaving the bathroom when she thought she heard me calling her name from the spare bedroom. She went to investigate but found nothing. As she turned to leave, the bathroom faucet turned on by itself. She checked to make sure it was really running, but before she could even react, it turned off on its own. Speaking of that spare bedroom, it has always had an unsettling presence. When you're in that room, you can't shake the feeling that you're not alone. You hear movement, like someone walking around or sitting on the bed, watching you. One summer night, my sister and I were sleeping in that room because it was so hot, and we wanted to stay cool. It was around 3:20 in the morning, and we had just gotten into bed when we heard the doorknob turn, followed by the door creaking open slowly. We thought it was our mom checking on us, but when we looked toward the door, no one was there. The door stayed open, just hanging there in the dark. We stared at it, waiting for some explanation, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no sounds of anyone moving. Eventually, the door creaked shut on its own. We asked our mom about it the next morning, and she said she hadn't been in the hallway at all. Sometimes, when you're in the bathroom with the door closed, you can hear movement outside, footsteps, or something dropping to the floor. And once in a while, you'll hear muffled voices, like people are having a conversation just outside the door. But when you try to listen closely, the voices are gone, as if they never existed at all. No one really likes the hallway leading to the bathroom. There's just something about it that doesn't feel right, like you're being watched, or that something is just there, lingering in the shadows. There's a strange energy in this house, and while I'm not sure what's causing it, I'm also not sure that I want to know. These odd occurrences don't feel malicious, but there's definitely something going on that we can't explain. After all these years, it seems like the past is still here with us, in ways we don't fully understand. I've been a Girl Scout since I was in first grade, and a few months ago I went up to Tomahawk Ranch in Colorado with my troop. We were the ones organizing the whole camp, and it was going to be a 3-day, 2-night trip. About 60 younger girls from ages 6 to 11 were attending, and we were in charge of everything. The first night, a girl in my troop, her mom, and I were tasked with going out to set up a fire for the girls. The activity center, where everyone else was singing camp songs, was about a 10-minute walk from where we were going. It was cold, and the further we ventured into the woods, the more we felt like something was following us. We stuck close together, constantly turning around to check, shining our flashlights into the trees. The tension was building, and even though we were all trying to act brave, it felt wrong. The woods were too quiet, too still. We got a little lost, but after a while, we finally made it to the fire pit. We put our fears aside for a moment and focused on building the fire. But as soon as we finished, that uneasy feeling crept back. The walk back felt like it took forever. Every little sound made us jump. Every shadow felt too close. Then we heard something. At first, it was just the crunch of leaves, like a deer or maybe a coyote. But then we heard a voice, a deep, raspy, unmistakable male voice, coming from the trees just beyond the light of our flashlights. It simply said, "Girls." We froze. The blood drained from my face. I didn't think, I just ran. We all ran back to the activity center, screaming the whole way, our feet barely able to keep up with our terror. Back in the safety of the group, we told the other girls what had happened, but they laughed it off. I almost started to doubt myself. Maybe I'd imagined it. After a few minutes of singing camp songs, our leaders came in and asked for 3 girls to go light the fire. Mickey and Twix, my friends, volunteered without hesitation. They made fun of me, but I was still so shaken that I decided to go with them. I wasn't going to let them think I was scared. We grabbed the matches and made our way back to the fire pit. I tried to act casual, but I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder, flashing the light in every direction. Mickey laughed at me, but then something caught my eye. I stopped dead in my tracks. My breath caught in my throat. There, just beyond the reach of our flashlights, was the figure of a man. I pointed, and Mickey and Twix froze. Their faces went pale, and without a word, we turned and walked. No, we crept down the trail, never once taking our lights off the dark forest. We were all silent, heartbeats pounding in our ears. When we reached the fire pit, I lit the match, but as I crouched down to start the fire, something felt wrong. The flames sputtered and died, and then the air grew colder. Twix dropped her light, and suddenly the fire flickered, dimming to a low, sickly glow. I hurriedly struck another match, but the fire was reluctant to catch. After a few frantic attempts and several minutes of nervously looking over our shoulders, the fire finally roared to life. That night, back at our cabin, things took a strange turn. We were all huddled together on mattresses in our pajamas, trying to wind down after the day's activities. The cabin we stayed in wasn't used often, and it had an old, creepy vibe to it. At around 1:30 a.m., there was a knock at the door. We all assumed it was the nice lady who owned the camp, so we sent one of the girls to check. She came back running, breathless, eyes wide in fear. When we asked her who was at the door, she said she didn't know. She described a man, an old, sickly-looking man who didn't look quite real. He wasn't there for long, but his presence lingered, leaving a strange chill in the room. We tried to shake it off, but no one could sleep after that. We moved our beds closer together, trying to feel safe in numbers. The next night we stayed in a different cabin, and thankfully, nothing happened. Still, I can't shake the feeling that something was there with us in the woods, and that man, whoever he was, wasn't the only thing lingering in those trees. I hope I never have to go back to that place, but if I do, I'll make sure I'm ready to face whatever's out there. My grandfather always used to tell me, "Don't meddle with the dead. We deal with their passing, and then we move on, as is our way." It's a saying that's stuck with me over the years, especially since I've found that sometimes, despite our best efforts, the dead can find their way to our doorstep. This story starts at a small 4-story ski condo in Telluride, Colorado. Growing up, my family and I would stay in the village of condos directly across from a ski shop and lift. It was the perfect place to have easy access to the slopes, just a quick trip in the morning or evening. The layout of the condo was simple but memorable. You entered through the front door and had to climb a set of stairs to reach the kitchen and living room area. To the left was the kitchen, and to the right, the living room. Another set of stairs led to the second floor where the master bedroom and bathroom were. A door to the right led to another flight of stairs that took you to a bathroom, and the final set of stairs reached the top floor where 2 twin beds sat. I was only 6 at the time, and what I remember most was loving the stairs. The open stairway allowed me to throw my dolls down and pretend they were flying. I hadn't learned to ski yet, but I loved this game. One afternoon, while I was playing on the second set of stairs, visible to my mom as she was in the living room, I suddenly came down one step at a time and said to her, "They keep talking." My mom looked up from what she was doing and asked, "Who keeps talking?" I simply pointed upstairs and said, "Them." I don't remember much of the conversation that followed, but I distinctly remember hearing muted laughter, like it was coming from a long tunnel. My mom, concerned, grabbed my hand and took me back upstairs. We stood below the third set of stairs, looking up. As we stood there, I said aloud, "Sha," to silence the voices. My mom asked if they were gone, and when I looked up, the laughter stopped. Needless to say, I stayed downstairs in the living room with the TV for the rest of the evening, while my mom did some blessings in the condo. I wish I could tell you that things ended there, but that wasn't the case. It wasn't until I turned 15 that my mom finally told me what had happened that night while we were all sleeping. She confided in me that she'd had a nightmare. In it, she was watching herself sleep from above. In the dream, she could see 3 people in the room with us. She described one of them as a woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, sitting on her chest. She said it felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her, even though she knew she was still dreaming. The other 2 figures, both men, were laughing, as though this was some kind of entertainment for them. They were both Caucasian, one with blonde hair and the other with dark hair. My mom managed to wake herself up, but when she looked around the room, it was empty. There was no one there. Still, the feeling of weight on her chest lingered, as if the dream had somehow crossed over into reality. She later asked my grandfather about it, and he explained that in some rare instances, certain spirits will harass specific people, often more than others. He said it wasn't unusual for this to happen, just one of those things you deal with and move on from. As I've gotten older, my experiences have become fewer and farther between, but I've never quite shaken the feeling that sometimes, even when you try to ignore them, the dead find their way back. The house I spent my teenage years in was built in Colorado at the turn of the last century, around 1900, with an addition added in the 1930s. It had an older section and a newer part, and to understand the full weight of this story, it's important to know that the older part had a different feeling to it. The only death I was able to document there was of a little boy around 10 years old, who passed during the influenza epidemic of 1918. His presence, along with a few others, was felt in the older section of the house, but nothing unusual was ever noted in the newer part. However, this isn't where the story begins. The layout of the house was as follows. When you walked through the front door, you entered the living room. To your left was the dining room, and off of that was a small hallway. To the right of this hallway were my brother's and my bedroom. To the left, my mother's and stepfather's room, with a bathroom between the two. The kitchen was off the dining room, leading to a small pantry, a back door, and the basement. My sister's room was off the living room, and this detail is important because the spirits in the older part of the house stayed in their section. They didn't cross into the newer part. For the most part, my brothers and I shared a room in the older section, and we never really had any problems. People often ask me if we experience something like a fear cage or a negative atmosphere, but I can tell you that wasn't the case. Most of the time, everything felt fine, even normal, in our room and the older part of the house. That is, until one day when I was 16. I had come home from school, and it was already dark outside, snowing heavily. I was exhausted, ready to drop my books and forget about everything when I walked into my room. I literally ran into something, not near it, not past it, but into it, like I hit a brick wall. This thing was tall, over 6 feet, and it was solid. I was about 5'10" at the time, so it wasn't just taller than me. It was massive. But it wasn't the size that scared me. It was the feeling of running into it. There was no giving, no movement. It felt like slamming into something that just hated you. It wasn't something you could see out of the corner of your eye or catch moving behind something. It was there, right in the middle of the room, and it was in your face as if daring you to acknowledge it. I couldn't make out any features. No eyes, no face, nothing. It was just an absence of light. Imagine a shadow darker than the darkness around it. This thing was the absence of everything. I couldn't even describe it as a shadow person, because it wasn't like anything I'd read about or seen before. This wasn't some wandering entity. It was something that had a presence, something tangible, something that felt like it was real fear. And it had an attitude, like it resented everything human. I didn't wait around to figure it out. I ran, and when you're 16, you can really run. I didn't stay in the room, and I didn't look back. Over the years, I saw it a few more times, and my brothers did too, though not in the same way. They never encountered it so openly, like I did that day. It always felt like something was just watching, lurking, but that time, it was right there in my face, and I could feel its hatred and darkness. When I was in 3rd grade, my family and I moved into a ranch-style home with a basement. There were 4 of us at the time. My mom, dad, sister, and me. We didn't know it then, but this house would become the setting for some strange and unsettling experiences that I still remember to this day. Oddly enough, it was mostly me, my mom, and my sister who had these encounters. My dad, on the other hand, never seemed to believe any of it. He chalked it all up to overactive imaginations. The first experience I can recall happened on my birthday. I was around 3rd or 4th grade, and I had my best friend over for a sleepover. It was a fun day. My parents threw me a birthday party, and we did all the normal stuff kids our age do. As night fell, my parents let us watch a movie before bed. We rolled out our sleeping bags in the living room since it was bigger than my bedroom and a more comfortable spot to hang out. After the movie, it was bedtime. We turned out the lights and snuggled into our sleeping bags. We had been lying there for maybe an hour when it started. At first, it was just a faint murmur, but soon it grew louder and clearer. It sounded like many people talking at once, like the kind of noise you'd hear at a party or a big event. The voices seemed to be coming from the stairs that led down to the basement. It was so loud, yet we couldn't make out a single word. It wasn't just a couple of voices. It was a whole crowd of people talking in unison. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voices stopped. We were completely freaked out at that point, trying to make sense of what we just heard. After a few minutes of silence, things got even more unsettling. We could hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming from the kitchen. The kitchen had hardwood floors, so the sound was very distinct, like someone walking around with heavy shoes or boots on. There was a small window in the living room wall that allowed us to peek into the kitchen, and it was through that window that we saw him. A man, tall, dark-haired, walked through the kitchen. We could see him clearly, but there was something odd about it. We couldn't make out what he was wearing, but the fact that he just appeared and then disappeared was enough to send us into a panic. We looked around the house, trying to find him, but there was no trace of him anywhere. We stayed silent for the rest of the night, too scared to speak or even move. It felt like hours before we finally fell asleep, though the whole time we never once spoke to each other. We just lay there, frozen with fear. The next morning, we told my mom everything that had happened. She was surprisingly calm and told us that she'd heard voices too. She even mentioned that she'd come out into the living room to tell us to be quiet, thinking we were the ones making all the noise. But here's the kicker. Neither my friend nor I had heard her. We didn't move at all when she yelled at us, and we didn't hear any of her footsteps coming down the hall. That's when I realized something was off. My mom, who had experienced paranormal things throughout her life, didn't dismiss our story. She believed us, even though we had no way of explaining what happened. And here's the strange part. My best friend and I are still in touch to this day, and we both still remember that night vividly. To this day, neither of us has any idea what we saw or who the man was, but it was the first time I'd ever encountered something truly paranormal, and it wasn't the last. There were many more odd happenings in that house after that night. I want to share something that has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My grandmother has had our house since before I was born. When I was 5 years old, my mom, older brother, and I had to move in with her because my mom was pregnant, and we had nowhere else to go. A few months later, my mom had my little brother, and we stayed with Grandma for a while. We eventually moved out into our own place up the street, but not long after, my mom had another little brother, and we ended up back at Grandma's house when I was 17. In the time we weren't living there, my uncle started building onto the house. He added a back extension and another floor upstairs, but then he moved to Wyoming before finishing the work. Grandma won't let anyone else finish it, and the unfinished spaces give me a strange feeling, especially the back part of the house. When I first moved back in, I feel very uncomfortable whenever I went to the back. It was as if someone was watching me. Sometimes, the feeling was so intense that I'd end up running back to the main part of the house. When I turned 18, I decided to move out and get away from that strange feeling. But even when I visited, the tension in that back part of the house never really went away, and it felt even worse when I got pregnant. Things started to go downhill with my boyfriend, and I ended up moving back in with Grandma. I was sleeping on the couch at first, but some nights I'd hear footsteps upstairs, even though no one was up there. After about a year, I moved into a room in the back part of the house, right outside the garage. But the footsteps didn't stop. Sometimes they'd even come down the stairs, pacing around downstairs. In August, the fear I felt during those times became overwhelming, but I still couldn't explain why. One morning, my boyfriend noticed I had a huge bruise on my leg. I had no idea how it happened and just thought maybe I bumped into something because I had been feeling a little anemic after having my daughter. But then, a few days later, the bruise lightened, and I noticed something strange. It had teeth marks, perfectly circular, like someone had bitten me. I tried to laugh it off, but things only got worse. One night, I was in my room, reading a book with my cat curled up on my bed. My cat suddenly looked up at the ceiling, then back down and up again, arching his back and hissing before running out of the room. That's when the footsteps started. I was scared, but I decided to stay in the room this time. The footsteps grew closer and closer to the stairs, and I could feel my fear rising. Eventually, I began praying, and as soon as I did, the footsteps stopped. But then it sounded like something ran down the stairs into the garage, and something hit my mom's car just outside my door. Then it stopped. The air in my room grew thick, and I couldn't breathe. I prayed even harder, saying, "Please protect me," and I ran out of the room. As I reached the old part of the house, both my cats went wild, hissing and growling. I didn't go back into my room for 2 weeks. When I finally did, I tried to take a nap one afternoon, but I woke up feeling like someone was pushing on my face. My whole body felt like it was buzzing, and my eyelids felt like they were being forced open. When I was fully awake, I realized I couldn't move or speak, just breathe shallowly. After what felt like 5 minutes, it stopped. I ran out of the room, went to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror. My right cheek was bright red. After that, none of us wanted to go back into the back part of the house. It felt like the fear I had built up had made whatever is there stronger. Whenever anyone hears footsteps or feels uncomfortable, we say, "My little buddy upstairs is acting up again." I'm really scared to sleep in my room now, and I can't even take my daughter back there to get in the car. I won't let her walk back there by herself, and if she does, I freak out. Has anyone had a similar experience? Does anyone have any suggestions on what I should do? I just want to feel safe in my own home again. Let me start by saying that I've never really believed in spirits or ghosts. I've always thought that kind of stuff was just made up. But something happened last night that has completely changed my mind. Now I'm definitely a believer. My boyfriend has been telling me about this shadow he's been seeing in his room. He said that sometimes when he's sitting in his computer chair doing homework, he'll suddenly feel like someone's standing right behind him. He thought it might be his mom, so he'd stop what he was doing and turn around, but no one would be there. Then, from the corner of his eye, he'd think he saw a faint shadow on the wall next to his desk. He'd look directly at it, and it would vanish almost instantly. He's told me this a few times now. but I always brushed it off with, "Oh, whatever, ghosts aren't real." Last night, though, was different. He mentioned it again, and once again, I didn't believe him. But I have to admit, his room does give me a bit of an unsettling feeling. After telling me about this shadow, he mentioned that he thought it might be his grandma, who passed away 3 years ago. He started telling me more about her, how she passed and how much he missed her. And then, for some reason, I began talking about my own papa. He passed away back in September of 2006. I shared with him that I just knew the last time I saw him was going to be the last time I'd see him. I told him how I hate saying goodbye. That last visit with my papa, I didn't say goodbye. I knew in my heart that it would be the last time I'd ever see him. And I just couldn't bring myself to say those words. That's when something truly strange happened. Right as I was talking about my papa, the letter I had written to my boyfriend, one that was tucked securely behind his motocross poster, suddenly rustled and slid along the wall. I jumped so badly that I scared the crap out of my boyfriend. He had no idea what I was so scared about because he didn't see what I saw. I told him I heard the rustling and saw my letter move. At first, he didn't believe me, but when he looked, his jaw dropped. My letter was completely gone. What made it even weirder was that the letter was in the same spot where he always sees the shadow. I had never believed in ghosts or spirits, but after that, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe something was going on. After a few minutes of trying to calm down, I got out of bed and went to look for my letter. It wasn't on the ground, but when I looked closely, I saw that it was simply tucked back behind his poster, just like it had been before. I tried to come up with a logical explanation for what had just happened. My boyfriend got up, put the letter back exactly where it was, and then I tried to debunk it. I blew on the letter from all angles, thinking maybe it was just the air from the vent causing it to move, some big coincidence. But the letter didn't budge. In fact, you actually had to push on the wall to make it move. And here's the strange thing, after all of that, I didn't feel scared anymore. Instead, I felt this unexpected sense of peace wash over me. Now, I can't help but wonder if it was my boyfriend's grandma moving the letter, maybe as a way of saying, "It's all right, don't be scared. I recognize who you are now." Or if it was my papa, maybe it was his way of saying, "I hear you, love." I guess I'll never really know, but whatever it was, I'm starting to believe there's something more to this world than I ever thought before. My story begins when I was just 3 years old. What's strange is that not only do I remember it, but my entire family recalls the same events as well. We had lived in Colorado for as long as I can remember, and this story took place in the same state. We lived in a house on Galley Road that my parents could afford at the time. It wasn't much, but there wasn't much else available. The previous owners had made one request. Under no circumstances should the renters go into the attic. The attic door was even painted shut, and if you wanted to get into it, you'd have to force it open. So my parents never bothered with it. Over time, strange things started happening in that house. One of the more unsettling incidents involved my mother seeing what appeared to be my father's doppelganger. Normally, seeing a doppelganger like that is a bad omen, but what made it even stranger is that my father didn't see his own. There were also other odd events, like when my newborn brother was pinched awake in his crib. It seemed like something unusual and unsettling was always hanging in the air. But the strangest thing, at least for me, happened when I was just 3. My mother had the same experience, and we both still remember it to this day. One night, I was sleeping in my mom and dad's bed, which wasn't unusual. I had always preferred being in their room rather than my own. I woke up in the middle of the night to find something, or someone, watching me from the doorway. The hall light was on, so I couldn't see much, just the shape of a figure standing there. At first, I thought it was my grandfather. I had no reason to think otherwise. The figure walked away, and I followed it down the hall, thinking it was someone I knew. But when I reached the doorway, it was empty. I paused for a moment, waiting, and then, suddenly, my mother's body appeared, but not in the way I expected. She wasn't walking normally. She was moving quickly, almost furiously, toward my bedroom. I followed her, feeling strangely compelled to do so, and when I reached my room, I saw my mother again. But this time, she was crawling under my bed. I should point out that my bed was very low to the ground, only about 2.5 inches from the floor. I ran to the edge of the bed and looked under it, and that's when I saw my mother's face. Her face, but it was crushed against the bed frame, her expression twisted in annoyance. I was terrified, and I ran straight to my parents' room, waking my dad up, saying, "Mom's under my bed, and she's mad." Confused, my dad got up, and I took him to my room. He went under the bed to check, but there was nothing there. He was visibly scared, and I could tell something was wrong. He left my room and went down the hall to find my mom, exactly where he had left her, sitting in front of the TV with my baby brother, both of them sound asleep. This wasn't the only strange thing that had happened. A few weeks before, my mom had seen a shadow standing in her doorway that she thought was my dad. But after the incident with me, things only got stranger. My parents started hearing strange sounds coming from the attic, like old box spring mattresses bouncing up and down. It felt like something was moving around up there, even though the house was empty. Eventually, we moved out of the house, but my mom wouldn't stay to clean. She couldn't handle it. So, my dad stayed behind to finish cleaning. The last room he had to clean was my old room. He was vacuuming when he noticed something odd. He heard a loud, wrenching sound coming from my room. He rushed to my room and found the vacuum hose had somehow been pulled into my closet bar, as if someone had yanked it there. He was scared by this and quickly left the room. As he was leaving, he noticed something else. The attic door, which had been sealed shut when we first moved in, was now open. The paint had been peeled back, as though someone, or something, had been tampering with it. That was the last straw. Even after we left, it felt like the house had a strange energy that never really went away. Hey everyone, I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I still remember what happened during a camping trip about 11 years ago when I was around 4 years old. Yes, I can remember that far back. And honestly, it's a bit of a curse sometimes, but that's just how it is. My parents had bought a used camper, and they decided to take me and my older brother, Pat, on a trip. Pat's about 9 years older than me, so we didn't have a lot in common, but that's beside the point. I don't recall much of the days leading up to that night at the campsite, but I do remember the camper. It was old, probably from the 70s. It wasn't in the best shape, and my mom thought that might be why we had such a terrifying experience that night. Maybe it had something to do with the campsite being near a Native American burial site. That's what some people called it, saying the ground there had gone sour. Or maybe it was just because we were trespassing, but whatever it was, I knew something was there, something otherworldly. It was a quiet evening. We were sitting around a campfire, trying to make s'mores. I remember the marshmallows were always too hot, burning my fingers as I tried to toast them. We also cooked some hot dogs over the fire. The night was settling in, and everyone was starting to get tired, so we decided to head into the camper for the night. I wasn't that tired though, since I had slept during the drive there. I was still little enough that my mom let me share the bed with her. I tried to sleep, but as the night went on, I just couldn't. And then, something happened. Something that still makes my heart race when I think about it. The camper suddenly started to shake. I could hear loud banging, like something was slamming against it from outside. My mom woke up first. She pulled me close, her arms tight around me, and I could feel the fear in her. At first, she probably thought it was an animal, maybe a bear or something. But then the banging got worse. It felt like whatever it was had jumped on top of the camper. It started slamming against the roof, trying to break in through the emergency exit. My mom tried to wake my brother Pat and Dad, but they were both out cold. Not even the noise seemed to bother them. Pat stirred for a second, asking what was going on, but then he was out again. My mom was so scared, I could hear it in her voice. She grabbed her prayer book and started reading aloud, praying to protect us. I just sat there, calm in her arms, listening to the chaos outside. I wanted to peek through the curtains to see what it was, but my mom wouldn't let me. Even though she was holding me so tight, I managed to catch a glimpse of something. Just a shadow, but it was huge. It looked like a dinosaur standing on two legs. I've never seen anything like it. As my mom prayed, it seemed to make the creature even angrier. It thrashed around even more violently, pounding on the camper. I wondered what kind of creature could have the strength to keep going for hours like that. It went on until morning, the whole night feeling like it lasted forever. My mom began to panic, checking to see if my dad was still breathing. He seemed to stop for a while, but every few minutes she would nudge him awake just to make sure he was alive. She believes that the creature was trying to possess my dad or my brother while they were asleep, to use them to hurt us. I'm not sure about that, but I do remember how scared she was. By the time the sun started to rise, the creature was still outside, relentlessly pounding on the camper, even in the soft light of dawn. My mom kept reading prayers to me, and I think some of them still stick in my memory. But eventually, the pounding stopped. It was like the creature had finally given up. My mom was so relieved, but just 5 minutes before it stopped, Pat woke up to the noise too. He wanted to go outside and grab his shoes, which he'd left near the campfire. My mom begged him not to, but you know how teenagers are. He went out anyway, and somehow he made it back safely. But when he came inside, he told us about the strange footprints he saw outside. Huge, three-toed prints, and deep claw marks all over the camper. That's when my mom knew this wasn't just some ghostly encounter. Whatever it was real. It was something physical. My dad woke up like nothing had happened, completely unaware of what had occurred. My mom told him everything, but he didn't believe her. He didn't even believe in an afterlife back then, even though he went to church every Sunday. But when we stepped outside to look at the damage, the other campers were already staring at us, wondering what had happened. We could see the massive footprints on the ground, 3 toes, like nothing I've ever seen before. The claw marks on the camper walls were so deep, it looked like something had tried to tear through it. My mom was ready to leave. She didn't waste any time, telling my dad that we had to go. But even with all the evidence, my brother and dad didn't believe what had happened. For them, it was like the night never really happened. But for me and my mom, it's something we'll never forget. As we were leaving the campground, we saw police arriving, talking to the owners. I'm not sure what they were questioning them about, but I assume it was because of all the noise the creature made. I'm not sure how they didn't hear it all night, but they definitely should have gotten there sooner. That night felt like it lasted forever, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My dad took some pictures of the footprints before we left, but I'm pretty sure those are lost now. All I have left is my memory, and it's still vivid. The only ones who really remember everything are me and my mom. I was only 4, so some of the details might be a little off, but that night was unforgettable. It was the longest night of my life. When we got home, we found something even stranger. My brother's cat, Jimmy, had been locked in the trailer with the heater on during the summer for 2 days. We rushed him to the vet, but they said he had to be put down. My brother cried over him, and honestly, I wish I had been nicer to that little guy. It was just bad luck, maybe, but with everything that happened, who knows? It could have been tied to the creature, or something else entirely. I've always been able to see things out of the corner of my eye since I was a kid, but it wasn't until my teenage years that I started seeing more clearly. Spirits, I guess you'd call them. Not as clearly as you might think, more like chalk outlines of people, where you can make out their faces but can't hear them. This all started when I was in a very bad place in my life, but who isn't in a tough spot as a teenager, right? I've had other spiritual experiences as well, but I'll get into that another time. The real story starts about 4 years ago when my brother moved back in with me and my mom. He brought his girlfriend and her cat along, and of course I had my own cat. My brother had told us he'd been haunted before he moved in. He even said he once took a picture of his car, and when he looked at it, There was an imprint of some kind of demonic figure on the hood in the dust. He took a picture, but I never saw it, and I wasn't really interested at the time. I had started getting more into spiritual shows on TV, things about ghosts, spirits, heaven, hell, that sort of stuff. It's funny because I was still a skeptic back then, having never really seen anything for myself. But that would soon change. When my brother and his girlfriend moved in, I found myself spending a lot of time in my room alone, and I started feeling off. It's hard to explain, but it was like I started to hate everything. Myself, the world, people in general. It was dark. I began seeing visions, death, faces, demonic figures. They didn't bother me as much after a while, but for a long time, they were all I could think about. I thought I was going crazy, but the real problem started one night when I came out to watch TV with my brother and his girlfriend. I walked into the living room, and I saw both cats sitting in front of the TV, staring into the darkness. I thought nothing of it and sat down beside them. The room was dim, just the glow from the TV lighting up the space. It felt cold and eerie, and for some reason, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. As I stared into the dark spot in front of the TV, I began to see something. At first, it was just a shape, but it slowly became clearer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I was frozen, too scared to move. There were two figures, both on all fours like animals, their tails upright like a cat's. I looked into one of their eyes, and it stared back at me, pitch black, darker than the shadows around it. I don't know how I said it, but I managed to get the words out. "You see that?" My brother looked at me confused. "See what?" "See that." I almost shouted, panic creeping into my voice. My heart was racing. I backed up into the hallway, keeping my eyes on the figures, trying to figure out if this was real. It was like a bad dream. I could still see the cats staring at the same spot, their eyes wide and unblinking. Then one of the cats approached the figures, sniffing the air where they were standing. The cat suddenly darted off, running past me, its claws scraping against the wooden floor as it bolted for the bathroom. I heard it puke in there. That's when I knew for sure. Those things were real. But my brother and his girlfriend didn't believe me. I went back to my room that night, feeling unsettled, and went to bed. Things didn't stop there. After that night, the dark presence seemed to follow my brother and his girlfriend. It got so bad that his girlfriend, who was a completely different person, tried to hurt their baby. One night, my brother had to run out of the apartment with his son in his arms, escaping from her. She had attacked him, saying in a voice deeper than her own that she wanted to kill the baby. She was stronger than him, and the neighbors had to pull her off. It wasn't like her at all. She had never been violent or aggressive. But after that, they decided to have a priest come bless their apartment. It seemed to help for a little while, but the strange things came back. They've had 3 kids since then, and I can't help but worry about their safety, especially with this darkness still hanging around. The priest didn't fix the problem, and I don't know how much help I can be if it ever gets worse again. They stayed with us for a while, and during those months, there was no activity. I think maybe it was because we were all together, united in a way, but now that they're on their own again, the strange things have started happening again, and I feel so helpless. I'm worried for them, and I don't know what to do. Sorry for the long story, but I needed to share it with someone who might understand, even just a little. "5 years ago, I had an experience that I can't seem to forget. I was close to death, lying on a landing with a skull injury, bleeding out for about 2.5 hours. It was only by chance that a roommate, who had just come home after a fight with his girlfriend, found me. He rushed me to the hospital, and the doctors later said I should have been dead. I remember a light. It was like something beyond this world, something peaceful, but I could also hear the paramedics saying that I wouldn't make it. I had lost 2.5 pints of blood, and when they found me, there was a pool of blood around me about 3 feet wide. The doctors wanted to give me a blood transfusion, but I refused. I told them, let me go if it's my time. Since then, I've been living with something I can't explain. I have this strange symbol on my right forearm. It looks like a weird Z, but it's curved, not sharp. The thing is, I'm left-handed, and I've never injured my right arm. It's something that just appeared, and it doesn't make any sense to me. A few months ago, while I was cooking a casserole for my wife and kids, something even stranger happened. The glass on the stove blew off the outer layer, and I mean it blew off with a loud, horrible sound. I didn't touch it, didn't do anything to cause it. It was like it just exploded for no reason at all. Then, a few weeks ago, I had another bizarre moment. I was in the middle of an argument with a friend of mine. We were going back and forth about his pride, and I started to feel this weird shift in me. Before I knew it, I blacked out for a moment, and without meaning to, grabbed him by the throat and threw him out the window of his own house. He's twice my size, and I'm left-handed, but I did it with my right arm. I can't even explain how or why I did it. Most recently, I had another strange experience. I found a dead bird on the ground, lying motionless. For some reason, I felt this strange pull to try and help it. I laid it on the floor, and I, almost instinctively, cut a symbol that looked like the Knights of Templar's mark. I don't know why I did it. I breathed life back into the bird after that, and it somehow came back, fluttering away. I've had other odd encounters before. When I was 14, I saw my first apparition, a dead bride in a wedding gown. She wasn't threatening, but it felt like she was calling out for something. Maybe love, maybe help. But now, I can't stop thinking about this symbol on my arm. It feels like I made a deal, like I traded something to stay alive. And I don't know if I made a bad choice, but it feels like something bigger than me is at play here. Has anyone else seen something like this symbol or had an experience like mine? I'm really trying to understand what it means, and if I made a terrible mistake. When I was younger, I always had this weird ability to see things out of the corner of my eye. Nothing too clear, but I'd catch glimpses of something strange. As I got older, especially during my teen years, these experiences became more vivid. I started seeing things more clearly, almost like a chalk outline, with no sound. I'd see faces, faint, but there. This all began when I was in a really bad place in my life. Honestly, who isn't during those years? But I'm starting to wonder if the timing had something to do with what happened. I've got other spiritual experiences too, but for now, I'll focus on the one that really stands out. It all started around 4 years ago when my brother moved back in with my mom and me, along with his girlfriend and her cat. I also had a cat. My brother had been feeling haunted for a while. He even took a picture of his car one day, and on the hood, he found what looked like an imprint of some kind of demonic figure, formed in the dust. I never saw the picture, and honestly, I wasn't that interested in it at the time. But the thing is, I had started getting really into shows about the paranormal. Spirits, ghosts, heaven, hell, you know, that kind of thing. Even though I was skeptical at first, I couldn't help but get obsessed. At that point, I still hadn't seen anything myself, so I thought it was all just TV drama. After my brother moved back in, I started spending a lot of time alone in my room, and that's when things got worse for me. I felt like I hated everything, everyone. I couldn't explain it at the time, but it was like this intense anger that consumed me. I started seeing visions of death, of faces, dark, demonic figures. These images haunted me at night, and for a long time, I couldn't shake them. Over the years, they've faded, and the anger has gone too, but for a while, it felt like they were a part of me. Now you might think it's all in my head, just a troubled teen, right? But the strange part is, I started having conversations, strange conversations, with whatever was causing this pain. I can't even fully explain it, but it felt real, like something was there with me. One night, I came out of my room to join my brother and his girlfriend in the living room. As I walked in, I noticed both cats sitting in front of the TV, their heads lowered, staring intently into the dark. I thought nothing of it at first, and sat down beside them. The room was pretty dim, only lit by the glow of the TV. I was still scared of the dark at the time, and the air felt oddly cold, like there was something off about the room. But then, as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something in the darkness in front of the TV. It was a figure. At first, it was hard to make out, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. And that's when my heart started to race. I saw two figures, both crouched down like cats. Their tails were raised high, and their eyes, black as night, locked onto me. It felt like they were looking into my soul. I froze. My voice was shaky when I said, "You see that?" My brother didn't seem to see anything, though. He just asked, "See what?" I panicked. I could feel my hands shaking as I backed away, moving into the hallway. I kept my eyes on them, wondering if they were real or if I was just losing my mind. Then something happened that made everything even worse. One of the cats, the one that had been staring at the figures, slowly walked up and sniffed the spot where one of them was standing. And then, in a split second, the cat bolted, running past me with its claws scraping the floor. It ran straight into the bathroom, where it started throwing up. That was all I needed to confirm my fears. These things were real. I went back to my room with my own cat, still shaken by what had just happened. Even though I tried telling my brother and his girlfriend what I saw, they didn't believe me. They thought I was just making it all up. I didn't push it any further and just went to bed. But that wasn't the end of it. Those things didn't just disappear. They kept haunting my brother and his family. His girlfriend, well, something terrible happened. She was possessed, or something like that. She tried to hurt their baby, and my brother had to run out of the apartment with his son in his arms as his girlfriend. Her voice, deep and strange, tried to attack them. She was stronger than him, much stronger. Neighbors had to step in and help, but it was terrifying. It wasn't like her at all. It was as if something else had taken over. Afterward, they called a priest, hoping a blessing would help. It worked for a while, but eventually, the activity started up again. And now they've got more kids, including a newborn, and I can't stop worrying about them. I feel like I need to do something, confront whatever this is, but if a priest couldn't stop it, what could I do? When they stayed with us for about 7 months, there was no activity. It was almost like the presence couldn't get to them while they were here. Maybe it was the peace of having everyone together. But now that they're back in their own place, it started again. I don't want them to be alone, but it would be cramped with 2 families. I'm just stuck. I'm hoping they'll go see another priest if it gets bad again. I know this is a long story, but I had to share it with someone who might understand. If you've experienced anything like this, or if you have any thoughts, I'd really like to hear them. Hey everyone, I want to share something that happened to me recently. It's been about 2 weeks now, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It all started one day when I was at home watching my younger brother. For some context, we live in a 2-story house with a basement and a main floor. My room is in the basement, right across from a bathroom, and an office is in between. There's also a family room down here where we keep our 3 pounds and Wii, and the Xbox is in the office. The basement is finished and leads to the garage. So one day, I was upstairs making lunch and talking to my boyfriend on the phone. I had just put the food in the oven and sat down on the couch when we got into one of our usual debates about which gaming system is the best. We were just sitting there, quietly chatting, when suddenly we heard a loud crash from downstairs. I called to my brother, asking him what it was, and he said a shelf had fallen off a nail and hit the desk in the office. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe just some faulty equipment or bad luck, right? After we ate, my brother went back downstairs, and I called my boyfriend again. Not long after, I heard a voice coming from the basement. At first, I thought it was just from the game, so I went down to tell my brother to turn it down. The voice kept going until I reached the hallway, but once I got closer, it stopped. When I walked into the family room, I saw my brother sitting there, wearing his headphones, playing a game. I tapped him on the shoulder and asked if he had just put them on. He told me he'd had them on the whole time. Fast forward to around 10 p.m. that night. I was sitting in the living room when I heard my brother call out, "Where is das?" Which, For those who don't know, means "who is that?" in German. I could hear him running into the office and then into my room, but a few minutes later, he went back to playing his game. Curious, I called my boyfriend and asked if he had taught my brother German. We all go to a charter school, and my brother's enrolled in a German class, so I thought maybe it was from that. But my boyfriend said no, and we ended the call. I just assumed my brother was repeating something from the game and went to bed. Then, around 4 in the morning, after my dad had already left for work, I was half asleep when I heard a man's voice. It was enough to snap me awake, but at first, I thought it might just be part of a dream. However, then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. I quickly grabbed a small army knife my cousin had given me for protection and quietly crept to the door. I opened it just enough to peek out, and I saw a pair of boots, old military-style boots, vanish into the office. The boots had a red circle with a white center on the upper flap. I followed the footsteps into the office, and though there was a bit of light from a nightlight, I couldn't make out the boots or much else. There was just a shadow against the wall near the window. It didn't seem like anything specific, and I wondered if I was just tired, so I went back to bed. A few hours later, when my mom left for work, she asked me if I had been playing the Xbox and sleeping in my clothes. She said she heard heavy footsteps and a man's voice, but it sounded muffled from upstairs. I was confused and told her no. I also called my dad to ask if he had come in to check on me before he left. He told me he hadn't, but he had checked on me when he woke up and left through the garage. Now, here's the strange part. I don't feel threatened by this man, and this wasn't the first time I've seen or heard him. But it's the first time my family members have noticed anything. I've experienced things like this before. This isn't the first ghost I've encountered. Back when I was about 8, there was a spirit in my old hometown, but I'll share that story another time. I'm not a skeptic, but I haven't seen any spirits since moving here. I'm starting to wonder if I should just leave him be, or if there's something I should do to make him go away. What do you all think? I'm just trying to figure out whether I should confront this, or if it's best to ignore him and let him be. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. We're renting a house just outside Binghamton, NY, and we're only the second people to live here. The house was built by our landlord and his wife, Anne Marie. They loved this house, and it was their dream home. Sadly, Anne Marie passed away from cancer about 5 years ago. After her death, our landlord had to move away, and we took over living here. Since then, we've had a number of experiences with Anne Marie, but at first, she wasn't exactly friendly. About a month after we moved in, I had to go away for the weekend, so my husband was home alone. He was getting ready to leave for a trip with a friend when, just as he was about to go down the stairs, someone pushed him, making him stumble and fall. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt. While they were in the car, my husband's friend casually asked if I had decided to stay home because he had seen a woman come out of the front door and float around to the backyard. My husband was shocked and told his friend what had just happened. The next week, both my daughter and I were pushed at the top of the stairs, making us lose our balance and fall. We figured it was Anne Marie trying to scare us away, but after that, it seemed like she realized we weren't going anywhere and that we were taking care of her house. Since then, she hasn't tried to harm us again. Other than those initial incidents, our encounters with Anne Marie have been pretty normal. We hear her walking around the house at all hours, and she'll sometimes open and close the front door or turn the TV and lights on and off. She has a habit of knocking on the walls and likes to play little tricks on us. For example, she'll hide something, like the TV remote, and we'll spend forever looking for it. Eventually, we'll ask her where it is, and later on, it will show up in plain sight. Our dog, Jack, is the most scared of her. He'll look down the downstairs hallway and then run behind the couch, terrified. But our cat doesn't seem to care at all. She'll be lying on the bed with us and suddenly, she'll stare at the doorway, following something with her eyes, like she's watching someone walk by. You can always tell when Anne Marie is around by the smell of her perfume. It's a scent we've come to recognize. We've never been afraid of her, though. This isn't the first time we've lived in a haunted house, so we've kind of gotten used to it. This story, as strange as it may sound, happened not too long ago. Tonight, actually. Let me give you a little background about my house. There's a hill to the right of it that always seems to make my friends uneasy. But for me, I've never been scared of it. In fact, I've always found it a bit fascinating. So, tonight, my friend Emily and I were sitting around, feeling bored. I told her how some of our other friends had gotten freaked out by the hill, and we decided it would be fun to go up there and mess around. At first, we were laughing and joking, just having a good time. But as we got closer to the top, something shifted. We both became quiet, for some reason we couldn't explain. We stood there for a moment, looking into the woods that covered the hill's peak, and that's when I saw it, a faint white figure. At first, I thought it might just be light filtering through the trees, but then I realized no light could get through those trees, and there was no way the light outside was that bright. I started to wonder if it was just my imagination, but when I glanced over at Emily, I saw the look on her face. She had seen it too. We both blinked, and it seemed to fade away. But when we talked about it, it came back, more noticeable, as if it was drawing energy from somewhere. It didn't really take on the shape of a person, but it seemed to bend and shrink, only to grow again. We weren't sure if we were just imagining things, so we decided to go back up a few more times to double check. Each time, there it was, white and glowing. It was real, and it wasn't going anywhere. But this wasn't the first strange thing I had encountered on that hill. Let me explain. My boyfriend had once shared with me a story about something that had happened to him. He was walking through a graveyard. I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, but bear with me. And he started feeling like something was there. Something dark, something evil. He didn't tell me much, and honestly, I didn't want to know the details. But one night, while we were talking on the phone, he told me it was there with him again, the ghost from the graveyard. I was shocked and asked him what he meant. He explained that he could feel its presence, and it was doing something to him. It took his breath away, literally. I could hear him gasping for air. And then, he said, it even made his heart stop for a moment. He was scared, but he tried to laugh it off. He swore all of this was real. Finally, he decided to go back to that graveyard, and that's when my own story took a turn. That night I was on the phone with him, trying to talk him out of going back. My friend Heather was visiting, and we'd been telling her ghost stories. She gets easily scared, so I dared her to go to the top of the hill. She refused, so to prove that nothing was really up there, I decided to go by myself. I walked up, then came back down to check in with Heather, who was still on the phone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I went back up. This time, when I reached the top, I heard footsteps. I thought it was Heather finally getting brave and following me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. I stood still for a moment, listening. The footsteps came again, but when I turned around, I looked down and saw something on the ground. Footprints, clear as day. That's when I started to get really freaked out. I hurried back down and made Heather get off the phone. I called my boyfriend, but I didn't tell him about what had happened. After a few minutes, though, he asked if anything strange had happened. I was curious why he'd asked, so I told him the story. He listened, then told me the ghost had visited him again, urging him to come back to the graveyard. He said the ghost had promised that if he didn't return, it would start visiting the people he cared about. I still don't know what happened that night, but something tells me that whatever it wasn't done yet. What do you think? Have you ever had an experience like that? Although these stories didn't happen to me, I believe they're true because my best friend, Ken, told me about them. Ken and I have known each other since we were kids, back in first grade. We're both 25 now. He's not the kind of guy who would lie about something like this, especially to me. I know him too well. In fact, he's never lied to me about anything, ever. We both grew up in a nice neighborhood in Northern Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. in 1992, I moved to Arizona, and Ken moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And anyone who knows about New Mexico knows that some pretty strange things happened there. The most recent thing Ken told me about happened after he moved into a new place. One night, Ken was woken up by his dog, Doji, barking loudly. Doji slept in the same room as Ken, so it startled him. Ken looked over to see what had his dog so upset and saw something in the bathroom doorway, just a few feet away. It was a white figure, floating about 3 feet off the ground. Ken said he stared at it for about 5 seconds, rubbed his eyes, and then looked again. The figure was still there, so he stared at it for almost a full minute. Terrified, Ken finally spoke up quietly, saying, "Could you please go and leave me alone?" The figure disappeared immediately. The next morning, Ken talked about it with his new roommate, who was also going to be his girlfriend. She told him that about 3 years before, a man had hanged himself in that same bathroom. After that night, the figure never came back. Ken's older sister, Becky, also a good friend of mine, had moved to New Mexico in 1993 to work as a jewelry designer. In 1995, she and Ken decided to drive back to Virginia for Christmas. It was a 2.5-day drive, and on their first night of traveling, they had an eerie experience together. They were driving on a lonely 2-lane highway in Texas around 3 a.m. They were heading northeast toward I-40 after getting off I-10. As they drove, they noticed a bright spinning light off in the distance, like a lighthouse beam. As they got closer, Ken slowed down to 10 miles per hour. They saw an old house, and from the second-story window, a very bright light was spinning. But that wasn't the strangest part. There was also an unnerving hum or buzz in the air, a sound that seemed to rattle the windows of the truck every time it passed. Both Ken and Becky told me they would never forget that sound, not as long as they lived. Then, without warning, they both felt a sense of pure evil, something much worse than just feeling uneasy. It was real, deep, heavy evil. Becky started shouting, "Just go, Ken. Get out of here." Ken slammed his foot on the gas, and they both looked back, seeing the house growing smaller in the distance. About 5 miles later, Ken saw a highway sign that read, "Black, 20 miles." They got off the road in a small town called Black and found a place to stay the night. Fast forward a few days later, when they were heading back to New Mexico from Virginia. They decided to take the same route to see if that strange house was still there. They passed through Black again, got on the same stretch of highway, and this time, nothing. No house, no light, just open fields stretching for miles. I've known Ken and Becky for a long time, and I believe every word they've told me. But even though I trust them completely, I can't say I believe everything 100%. Nothing like that has ever happened to me. Am I wrong for thinking that way? I don't think so. It's just being practical. It's like saying you love roller coasters, even though you've never been on one. Although these stories didn't happen to me, I believe they're true because my best friend, Ken, told me about them. Ken and I have known each other since we were kids, back in first grade. We're both 25 now. He's not the kind of guy who would lie about something like this, especially to me. I know him too well. In fact, he's never lied to me about anything, ever. We both grew up in a nice neighborhood in Northern Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. in 1992. I moved to Arizona, and Ken moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And anyone who knows about New Mexico knows that some pretty strange things happened there. The most recent thing Ken told me about happened after he moved into a new place. One night, Ken was woken up by his dog, Doji, barking loudly. Doji slept in the same room as Ken, so it startled him. Ken looked over to see what had his dog so upset and saw something in the bathroom doorway, just a few feet away. It was a white figure, floating about 3 feet off the ground. Ken said he stared at it for about 5 seconds, rubbed his eyes, and then looked again. The figure was still there, so he stared at it for almost a full minute. Terrified, Ken finally spoke up quietly, saying, "Could you please go and leave me alone?" The figure disappeared immediately. The next morning, Ken talked about it with his new roommate, who was also going to be his girlfriend. She told him that about 3 years before, a man had hanged himself in that same bathroom. After that night, the figure never came back. Ken's older sister, Becky, also a good friend of mine, had moved to New Mexico in 1993 to work as a jewelry designer. In 1995, she and Ken decided to drive back to Virginia for Christmas. It was a 2.5-day drive, and on their first night of traveling, they had an eerie experience together. They were driving on a lonely 2-lane highway in Texas around 3 a.m. They were heading northeast toward I-40 after getting off I-10. As they drove, they noticed a bright spinning light off in the distance, like a lighthouse beam. As they got closer, Ken slowed down to 10 miles per hour. They saw an old house, and from the second-story window, a very bright light was spinning. But that wasn't the strangest part. There was also an unnerving hum or buzz in the air, a sound that seemed to rattle the windows of the truck every time it passed. Both Ken and Becky told me they would never forget that sound, not as long as they lived. Then, without warning, they both felt a sense of pure evil, something much worse than just feeling uneasy. It was real, deep, heavy evil. Becky started shouting, "Just go, Ken. Get out of here." Ken slammed his foot on the gas, and they both looked back, seeing the house growing smaller in the distance. About 5 miles later, Ken saw a highway sign that read, "Black, 20 miles." They got off the road in a small town called Black and found a place to stay the night. Fast forward a few days later, when they were heading back to New Mexico from Virginia. They decided to take the same route to see if that strange house was still there. They passed through Black again, got on the same stretch of highway, and this time, nothing. No house, no light, just open fields stretching for miles. I've known Ken and Becky for a long time, and I believe every word they told me. But even though I trust them completely, I can't say I believe everything 100%. Nothing like that has ever happened to me. Am I wrong for thinking that way? I don't think so. It's just being practical. It's like saying you love roller coasters, even though you've never been on one. Let me tell you a story my great-grandmother once told me. My mom's mom passed away when my mom was only 5 years old, so my great-grandmother ended up raising her and her brothers and sisters. One day, my great-grandmother was sewing in her bedroom when she suddenly felt like someone had come into the room. She looked up and saw her daughter, my mom's mom, standing in the doorway, just staring at her. Before my great-grandmother could say anything, the ghostly figure spoke, asking, "Where is the baby?" My great-grandmother, a little confused, replied, "She's playing in the backyard." As soon as she answered, the ghost vanished. Shaken and unsure of what she had just seen, my great-grandmother decided to wash some dishes to clear her mind. She'd been washing dishes for only a few minutes when she suddenly felt someone enter the room again. She turned around, and there was her daughter again. Their eyes met, and once again, the ghostly figure asked, "Where is the baby?" Worried something was wrong, my great-grandmother quickly went to check on the baby in the backyard. But when she got there, the yard was empty, and the gate was open. She rushed around, looking for her, and eventually found her walking toward a busy street near their house. Luckily, she was able to catch up to her just before she wandered into the street. Years later, I was visiting my mom at home. As I walked past the front room on my way to the kitchen, I noticed a woman sitting there. She had shoulder-length, light-colored hair and was wearing a black dress. I thought it was my sister-in-law, Tony, so I kept walking to the kitchen. After talking to my mom for a few minutes, I asked her why Tony was sitting by herself in the front room. My mom gave me a strange look and told me Tony was at work. I thought she was joking, so I went into the front room to get her. But when I got there, no one was there. Thinking maybe she had gone upstairs, I searched the rest of the house but found nothing. I told my mom I really did see someone sitting there. She asked what they looked like, and when I described her, she said, "Oh, that was my mother. Before she died, she told me she'd always be near me." I don't know if I really saw my grandmother's ghost or not, but I know I saw someone that day, and then they were gone. I'm sure of it. I grew up in an old farmhouse in North Carolina, and I've always been sensitive to paranormal activity. It seems like this runs in the family. Our house had a lot of visitors that I always believed came from the old, abandoned cemetery in the woods nearby. I would often smell lavender sachets, even though no one in my house used them. Sometimes I'd hear the piano playing, but when I'd go into the room where it was, no one would be there, and the bench would always be pushed back under the piano, just as it had been. One of the visitors seemed to walk through my room at night. I always felt like this one was a male presence. He'd sometimes hide things, only to return them days later, but always in very obvious places. My sister, who doesn't share the same sensitivity, would always make fun of me. My mom never commented on any of it, and my dad never experienced anything that he couldn't explain away. One weekend while I was away at college, my mom called me and said one of my friends had been looking for me. I asked which one, and she said, "The one that walks through your room at night." It turned out, my friend had similar experiences, but had never said anything about it before. Fast forward about 7 or 8 years, and I was stationed in Northern California with the Air Force. My husband, our infant daughter, and I moved into a duplex. Almost immediately, I started noticing things. Sometimes, the baby would be covered in a blanket when I knew I hadn't put it on her. I also got the feeling that I was being watched when I walked down the hallway. The baby's pacifiers would disappear and then reappear in the exact place I had left them. There were also toys that would play by themselves, even when no one had touched them. The big event happened one night. My husband woke me up and asked why I pinched his butt. I told him I hadn't, and to just go back to sleep. A couple of minutes later, he jumped out of bed and yelled, "Someone pinched my asterisk so." After that, the rabbit ears on the TV started to move. Only one of them moved, and it was tapping very deliberately against the wall. My husband, a bit freaked out, told whoever it was that they could haunt the house all they wanted, but our bedroom was off limits. The activity stopped right away, but it didn't disappear completely. It became more subdued after that. When we moved into military housing, we actually missed the activity. Now, in our new home, things have been quiet, until recently. Lately, I've heard music coming from the living room at night, after we've gone to bed. Just the other day, I was sitting on the couch in the middle of the afternoon, watching TV, when I heard someone say my name right next to me. My Yorkshire Terrier heard it too. She woke up, jumped off her chair, and looked around the room like she was searching for someone. A few years ago, in 2001, I began a study course in life and meditation techniques. I was 30 years old at the time, and while it's a strange story that led me to this path, maybe even a ghostly one, I'll save that part for later. The truth is, I wasn't a natural at yoga or meditation. At first, I struggled a lot with building the habit. Back then, my husband and I lived in a small apartment in a nice part of Denver, just outside downtown, in a place called The Seasons. It was a new apartment complex, and though Denver is filled with old historical buildings, this one was pretty modern. Our place had 2 bathrooms, and since we didn't use the master bath much, I decided to convert it into a little meditation nook. Every day, I would sit cross-legged on a soft silk cushion in the bathtub, spending 30 minutes each morning and night in deep silence, just communing with God. It's important to mention this because what happened later that year seemed connected to my meditation practice. One afternoon, after a particularly deep meditation session, I lay down on our bed to rest before dinner. I was completely relaxed, but not asleep, my arms feeling almost weightless. It was at that moment that I experienced something I had never felt before. It was as if part of my astral body was hovering just above my physical body. I could feel both my real arms and my spirit arms at the same time, in 2 places at once. It wasn't scary, just strange, and strangely pleasant. But that feeling didn't last long. Out of nowhere, my spirit arms were grabbed by a powerful force. I felt my entire being, my soul, if you will, yanked from my body. In an instant, I was pulled through the air, dragged into our walk-in closet, and then forced downward through the floor. It felt like I was sinking into something, being pulled deeper and deeper, as though I might never come back. It was like being kidnapped, stolen from my own body. I remember flailing my astral arms and legs, struggling to break free, to pull myself back up from whatever had me in its grip. As I was pulled down into the floor, I could see everything clearly. I saw dust bunnies resting on one of my husband's shoes. I could see the little carpet fibers as I passed through them. I even saw the raw materials inside the floor, the wood, steel, and concrete beneath. It was like I was being dragged through the very foundation of the building. The panic started to rise in my chest. I tried calling out to my husband, who was in a nearby room, but I couldn't make a sound. It was like my mouth was filled with some invisible air or water, making it impossible for me to speak. My struggle seemed to last forever, though it could only have been a few moments, until, just as suddenly as it started, I was back in my body, lying on the bed. I was exhausted and terrified, my heart racing. I didn't even have to swim back to my body. It was as if the attack simply stopped, and I was whole again. In a daze, I ran to my husband and burst into tears, telling him everything that had just happened. He tried to comfort me, suggesting it might have just been a dream. But deep down, I knew it hadn't been. I didn't sleep in our bedroom for weeks after that, and I didn't meditate in the bathroom for a long time either. It had been no dream. We don't live in that apartment anymore. Time has passed, and although I still meditate occasionally, I don't practice as deeply as I once did. Part of it is because life has become busier. Raising a family takes a lot of time, but also because I've always wondered if there's a connection between the meditation and that strange, frightening experience. I've been told by my church that it may have been a tramp spirit, a restless entity having a bit of fun at my expense. They assured me that if I focused solely on God while meditating, I would have nothing to fear. But to be honest, that always felt like a big should to me. Even though the house we live in now has a good, peaceful energy, there have been strange things that have happened here too, especially after the births of our children. I don't open myself up to those experiences as much as I used to. Maybe someday, but not yet. Have you ever experienced something similar? Something that made you wonder if there's more to our world than meets the eye? When I was about 5 years old, my mom worked as an accountant at a place called the Brook Forest Inn. One of her good friends owned it. We spent a lot of time there, often staying overnight. It wasn't until recently that my mom shared a few things about the inn that she hadn't told me back then, things she didn't want to scare me with as a child. Before I go into the story, I just want to clarify something. I've read some articles about the inn, but I'm certain that the inn and the house across the street were once owned by Nazis. There's a sealed tunnel under the road that connects the two buildings. The door to the tunnel is in the inn's basement. The basement floor used to be covered in tiles with swastikas on them. Those tiles were removed, but according to an interview with the owner, a few of them are still hidden away. I was just a small child the last time I visited, so there are only two things I clearly remember, and one of them is the basement. One day, my mom was working downstairs when she heard the sound of vacuuming coming from the second floor. She thought it was one of the maids cleaning and went upstairs to ask her a question. But when she stepped onto the second floor, the vacuuming stopped abruptly. She looked around, but no one was there. The maid wasn't even around. It was strange and unsettling. A few months later, my mom was talking to a friend when she heard running sounds above her, someone running up and down the hall on the third floor. Thinking it was just a guest being loud, she went upstairs to ask them to settle down. But when she reached the second floor, she realized that the sound was coming from the third floor. This was the first time she had actually gone to the third floor, and she described the walk up the stairs as so paranormally intense that it was nauseating and terrifying. She made it up to the top, but by then, the noise had stopped, and there was no one in sight. There was another odd incident with some men from an Indian reservation who came to stay at the inn. Their rooms were on the third floor, but they refused to stay there. Instead, they slept in the lobby and then left to stay at a different inn for the rest of their trip. They wouldn't stay in those rooms. The second thing I remember from the inn is the third floor. I was up there for only about a minute, but I can still remember it perfectly. The moment I think back to it, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The stairway up to the third floor had a strange, heavy feeling. Even now, just thinking about it, I can still sense something unsettling about it. I've had my share of ghostly experiences throughout my life, but it's my current situation that's left me feeling trapped. I own this house, and unfortunately, I can't just move away from it. The things that have been happening here have gotten so bad that I'm terrified at night. I even sleep with the light on now. Here's a bit of background. A man who used to live in my house died in a tragic motorcycle accident. It turns out that the world is smaller than we think, and I know someone who knew him when he was alive. From what I've heard, he liked to throw parties here. One of his friends who spent time at the house was violently murdered by her boyfriend. The strange activity in my house began months before all of this. Recently, I had my cards read, and when it was time to ask a question, I said, "In my house," before the reader cut me off. "You mean the ghosts?" she said, almost as if she already knew. Without me saying anything more, she described a male spirit who was bothering me and a female spirit who was trying to communicate. The most intense activity seems to take place in my bedroom. My husband snores heavily, so he often sleeps on the sofa to let me get some rest. That leaves me alone in the room more often than not. One night, I walked into the dark room, about to turn on the light, when I immediately felt a presence. It was as if someone was trying to hide from me, not expecting me to run into them. The energy quickly vanished, but the feeling lingered. A few days later, I woke up in the middle of the night. I could hear someone walking into the room, and I saw a shadow in the dark that looked like my husband. As the shadow hovered over the bed, I realized it wasn't him. The moment I recognized it, the shadow disappeared, as if it knew I knew it wasn't real. I nervously told the ghost to leave me alone, though I wasn't sure it would listen. About a week later, I was woken up by a voice. It felt like a female energy. She clearly said, "I'm dead." I haven't heard her since, but part of me wonders if she's being suppressed by the stronger male energy in the house. Last week, I came home from the store with my son. Both my bedroom door and the door to the basement were closed. I asked my son if he closed them, but he said no. I didn't remember them being closed when I left, and if they had been, I would have opened them myself. The animals couldn't have closed them, and I've never had doors closed from air circulation in this house. It was strange. A few nights ago, my husband came into the bedroom. It wasn't too late, and he had something to ask me. When he came in, I woke up and saw him standing next to the bed, but my attention was immediately drawn to someone sitting on the floor, staring at me. Their face was at the level of the mattress, and they were only a few feet away from me. In a moment of panic, I grabbed a pillow I was holding and threw it at the apparition, thinking it was my husband. He didn't understand why I had thrown a pillow at him, but he has seen strange things like shadows in the corners of rooms and the computer turning on by itself. He hasn't had the same direct experiences as I have, so he doesn't quite understand why I'm so scared. A few nights ago, I tried to protect myself. I did a salt ritual, smudged the house with sage, and slept with a candle burning. That night, I slept much better. Unfortunately, some of the salt got into the bed, so I had to wash the sheets the next day. I also tried a trick where you place shoes at the foot of your bed, with one turned the wrong way to confuse any spirits. Later that evening, I found my slippers neatly placed outside my bedroom door, perfectly aligned. That's not where I left them, and I know my husband didn't place them there, especially since one of them has a ribbon on it, which I always use to distinguish which foot it goes on. I tried to convince myself that I must have done it without remembering, but deep down, I know that wasn't the case. The last straw came last night when I had a nightmare. Or at least, I think it was a nightmare. Maybe it was the male ghost messing with me again. In the dream, I could feel his dead arm when I reached out. I woke up trying to scream my husband's name, but I couldn't find my voice. I rushed to find him and made him stay in the bedroom with me, even though he was snoring. I couldn't bear to be alone with whatever is haunting me anymore. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I had just moved to Colorado from my parents' house in Pennsylvania, which itself had its share of unsettling experiences. At my old house, I always felt threatened, as if something were constantly watching me. When I moved away, it seemed like that feeling lifted, but it was never completely gone. Sometimes, I still felt like something was following me. It was a strange sensation, like something keeping its distance, always there but never too close. There would be moments when I would stop, almost listening or feeling for it. In those moments, I could sense its presence, watching from a specific spot in the room, like it was standing just out of sight. It was a sensation that reminded me of walking and suddenly realizing someone was following you. But when you stop, they stop too. It was creepy. Around this time, I began to notice strange sounds in the house when I was alone. Footsteps, creaks in the floor, like someone was moving around when no one else was there. One night, as I lay in bed, the sensation of something lingering nearby was overwhelming. It was like someone was watching me from a distance, but never getting too close, as if it was afraid to approach but still wanted to. I lay in bed, trying to ignore the feeling, listening to the familiar sounds of the night. My dad and stepmom snoring softly in the next room. But then, I started hearing something different. The creaks in the hallway sounded like someone was standing just outside my door, shifting their weight restlessly. Then I heard my stepmom get up to use the bathroom. At the same time, I heard soft footsteps retreating down the hall. She returned to bed, but a few moments later, I heard the same soft steps move across the carpet and stop just outside my door. To clarify, only my dad, stepmom, and I were living in the house at the time. My parents were peacefully snoring in their room, so whose footsteps were those? Who was outside my door? I could feel its presence, heavy in the air, as if it was right there, almost tangible. I did something then that I'd never done before, and probably shouldn't have. I spoke out loud, challenging it. I asked that if it was really there, it should make a sound. I told it to knock on my door. For a moment, everything went silent. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. Then 3 soft knocks echoed from the middle of my door. The knocks were slow and deliberate, spaced out by brief pauses. My heart raced in my chest, but it didn't stop there. Slowly, I heard the metallic squeal of my doorknob turning. A wave of fear washed over me. It wasn't just my imagination. My doorknob was turning, and I realized that whatever was on the other side of the door was about to enter my room. I had, in some way, invited it in by acknowledging its presence. My fear reached a breaking point. I found my voice and firmly said, "Stop, go away. You're not welcome here." To my relief, the doorknob stopped turning, and the room fell silent again. I lay there, trying to relax, listening carefully. The presence was still there, thick in the air. Then, I felt a soft pressure on my leg, as if something was touching me. The blankets even shifted slightly under the weight. I didn't feel an immediate danger, but I wasn't exactly comfortable either. I whispered for it to go away again, and the pressure slowly eased as I eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. You'd think it would end there, but it didn't. Every now and then, when I'd feel that strange sensation of being watched or followed, I'd hear those same 3 soft knocks. The feeling of being observed, of something lurking just out of view, never truly left me. I can usually sense it now, but I don't let it into my life the way I did before. I try to keep it at a distance, or better yet, hope it's gone altogether. But some nights, when the air feels too still and the house too quiet, I wonder if it's still there waiting, and I hope I never have to find out. I've heard many stories about people being haunted rather than places, and honestly, I think I might be one of those people. My dad worked in the military until recently, which meant we moved a lot. We changed houses every couple of years, and I've lived in quite a few places. I can only remember one house where nothing strange ever happened. To keep things short, I'll share the more memorable moments. When we lived in Pennsylvania, the neighbors often said our house was haunted. My parents laughed it off, but it did make me uneasy. We lived there for a year, and nothing odd happened until one night around 3 a.m. I was just getting ready for bed when, out of nowhere, I felt incredibly tired. I didn't even bother closing my door. I just dropped onto the bed. I closed my eyes for a moment when suddenly, I heard footsteps running down the hall toward me. My heart raced. I sat up, eyes wide open, but saw nothing. The footsteps kept getting louder until they stopped right at my door, and then I felt warm air rush toward me. That was enough. I didn't sleep a wink that night. A little later, around Christmas, we were putting up some decorations outside. My parents had to leave to pick up my sister from soccer practice, so I was home alone. I found myself staring out the window at the yard. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't bright either. Then, something strange caught my eye. It was a transparent figure, and I wasn't sure if I had seen it correctly. It stopped for a moment, seemed to glance back at me, and then moved toward the front door. I thought it was just my imagination until I heard knocking at the door. I peered out the window to check, but there was no one there. The knocking kept going, though. I could still hear it, but I couldn't see anyone. About a year later, we moved to Colorado. We lived on an Air Force base in a tiny house. Again, things seemed normal for a while. It wasn't until one night, when my brother and I were talking about strange experiences, that something unusual happened. He shared a story from his college days, where a lamp would turn on and off by itself when he was alone. Almost immediately after he told the story, a light in our living room started flickering on and off. It wasn't a light we ever used much, so it was definitely odd. We were both in the room, about 30 feet away, but no one was near the light. We checked it out, but everything seemed normal, and it never happened again. It was so strange, and we never had to change the bulb. After a while, we moved into a bigger house in the same neighborhood. I liked it at first, but that's when things started to get strange. In my room, there were 2 beds, one on each side of a window. I slept on the one on the right because around midnight, the moonlight would shine on it, and it was calming. But one night, something odd happened. As the moonlight fell over me and onto the wall, I noticed shadows moving across my body. At first, I thought it was just deer outside. I lived in a mountainous area, so deer were common. But after a few times, I started to get curious and scared. I looked out the window, and there was so much movement in the trees right outside. I remember being too scared to look properly at first, but eventually, I gathered the courage to check again. That's when I saw it. A pale face just staring at me from behind a porch support. It wasn't a full figure, just the face, sneering. I froze. I looked at it for what felt like forever, to make sure my eyes weren't tricking me. Then the eyes widened, and I quickly turned on all the lights, closed the blinds, and sat in the corner of my room. From then on, every time I saw movement in the trees, there was laughter, about 1 time in every 4. I started sleeping with the blinds closed after that. A few nights later, I had a dream. In it, I walked out the back door in the morning, and there was a man with a yellow mask sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. He looked at me, smiled, and started laughing. It was calm at first, but it made me feel uneasy. I just walked past him toward the door, and then I woke up. To this day, that mask still gives me chills. After a while, my dad retired, and we moved into the house I'm living in now. We've only been here for about 4 months, but already, strange things have been happening. My sister has had some experiences too. Every night, around midnight, I brush my teeth and wash my face before bed, and about half the time, I hear footsteps coming up the stairs and down the hall toward me. Every time, I freeze, then slowly peek around the corner to see who it is, but there's never anyone there. One time, after hearing the footsteps, I decided to investigate. I got halfway down the stairs when I heard a girl giggling and what sounded like frantic shuffling, like someone was trying to hide from me. My sister wasn't even home that night. My brother and I have also heard a faint whispering, like a girl speaking right in our ears when we walk up the stairs. A few weeks ago, our grandparents stayed with us for 3 weeks. They stayed in my room, so I slept on the couch in the basement. My sister's room is also downstairs. One night, she was walking to the bathroom around 2 in the morning. She says she saw me huddled under the covers on the couch, laughing hysterically. She was scared and rushed back to her room, saying I wouldn't answer her. But the strange thing is, I was upstairs in bed that night. I can't say I'm looking for an explanation. I just wanted to share my story. It's interesting in a way, but also unnerving. Most of the time, I try to tell myself it's all just a coincidence or something natural. But deep down, there's this feeling that something is off. If anyone else has experienced something like this, I think you might know exactly what I mean. What do you think? Have you ever had something strange happen to you like this? I've shared a story before about my daughter having a visitor, and I'm really happy to update that things have gotten better. Her friend doesn't scare her anymore, and now they actually have conversations and sometimes even play together. But today, I want to share some experiences I had as a child. After some pretty tough times, I stopped having these strange experiences. I had to see a therapist because of all the nightmares and sleepless nights. After that, I was prescribed medication and I stopped being able to communicate with the visitors I used to see. Honestly, I kind of regret that now. When I was younger, my bedroom was in the basement, and I had a window well. I never opened the window because there were tons of spiders, and somehow toads would end up down there too. But during the day, the curtains would always sway, like a breeze was coming through the window, even though the window was closed. Most nights, I'd wake up to a lot of voices, all trying to talk over each other. I could never make out what they were saying, but I always heard my name. Along with the voices, I'd also see shadows moving around my room. But like I said before, all of this stopped after I was prescribed something, and I honestly can't remember what it was. Looking back, I'm a little disappointed about that because I feel like I lost something important. Another strange thing that would happen was my door. It would always open halfway, then slowly shut on its own. This would go on for a couple of minutes before it finally stopped. In our house, there was a spirit we all called Henry. He liked to make his presence known, and most of the time, I was home alone when it happened. I'd hear someone running up and down the stairs or walking around in the hallway. If my siblings and I had done something to upset our mom, the activity would get a lot more intense. Sometimes, when I was feeling sad, I could even feel a hand on my shoulder. There's one experience I remember very clearly. My mom was in her bedroom, reading a book with the cat sitting beside her. She suddenly started hearing footsteps outside her window, but when she looked, no one was there. The cat, though, got up, arched his back, and started making this strange sound, like he was barking and growling. After about 30 seconds, he just stopped, laid back down, and went to sleep. That was, without a doubt, the scariest experience we had in that house. When I was 6 years old, I lived in a different house than the one I live in now. Now I'm 15, and I look back on those memories with a mix of curiosity and confusion. When we first moved into that house, there was a babysitter who looked after me. I remember being in the basement, which was unfinished and kind of dark. It wasn't hard to see why it felt a little scary. I noticed something odd on the wall. A huge letter S. I asked the babysitter what it was, and she told me it stood for Satan. I was only 6, so I didn't question it. I told my mom, and after that, she wouldn't let her babysit me anymore. Mom also explained that the S was where the stairs were supposed to go, though they never did. Still, that only added to the fear I felt in that house. I began having nightmares about the basement. In these dreams, there was a creature that looked like the version of death you see in cartoons. Tall, dark, and shadowy. It would take my family and me, trapping us in the basement, where we were surrounded by ghosts. But the only safe place was under the stairs. Someone was always left upstairs, and sometimes they didn't make it. I don't know why those dreams scared me so much, but they felt real, like something I couldn't escape. When I was 4, I had another dream, this one about an evil clown. The clown would hurt and confuse my family, which doesn't sound pleasant at all. Even though it's a little off topic, that dream was terrifying, and I still remember it clearly. But what stands out more from that time is the figure I would sometimes see in my doorway. It wasn't a clear person. In fact, it wasn't even solid. I could just make out the shape of a man with black eyes, brown hair, wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans. He would stand in the doorway, leaning against the frame, staring at me. It was unnerving, and I didn't understand why he was there. I never spoke to him. In fact, after hearing about what happens when you do, I'm glad I didn't. One morning, as I sat eating breakfast, I suddenly thought of him. Out of nowhere. I hadn't been thinking about him at all, but then I saw his feet. He was standing right in front of me, just watching. I told my mom, and she told me to ignore him. Eventually, I told my parents that I just wanted him to leave me alone, so they came into my room and prayed with me. I believed in God then, and I still do now. They prayed that if the figure was evil, it would leave me alone. But if he was a guardian angel, I would know that and not be afraid. After that prayer, I never saw him again. My parents also told me that I used to see strange brown shapes dancing at the foot of my bed, and sometimes a black or purple figure would be there too. I don't remember those clearly, but I do remember waking them up to tell them about it. I was scared, and they always comforted me, but after a while, I don't remember seeing anything like that again. When I was 8, we moved to a new place. The traffic around our old home had become too much, and my parents wanted a quieter, more peaceful area. But around the time I was 11, I started seeing something else. Tall, white figures. They looked like shadows, shapes that were tall and cloaked, but I could never make out their faces or what they were wearing. At first, I thought they might be angels, but a part of me wondered if they could also be something else, something darker. Sometimes I'd see smaller, darker shadows, almost like figures that lined up near the floor. They were only about a foot tall, and I could never see them clearly. I didn't know what to make of them. Now when I'm older, I still see things from time to time. I'll notice tall black shadows standing by my door or hiding behind it. They just watch me. It's hard to explain, but I always feel like I'm being watched, even when I don't see anything. It makes me question myself. Am I just imagining it? Sometimes, I wonder if it's just my mind playing tricks on me because I've always had a bit of paranoia. When I was younger, I used to worry that people didn't like me. That fear is still there, and I don't trust people easily. Late at night, around 3:00 a.m., I sometimes see a shadow, either white or black, pass by my bed. There were nights when I saw a tall black figure standing in the corner of my room, with a shorter figure beside it. For some reason, I felt like they were a mother and daughter, but there was something about them that felt off, like they weren't here for good reasons. These days, I mostly see shadows near my door. I don't know what they are. Who are they? What do they want? And why do I feel like I'm not alone, even when I'm by myself? What do you think about all of this? Have you ever seen something like this before? When I was just a baby, my dad tragically passed away from a gunshot wound, only hours after my sister was born in 1977. My mom, still in the hospital, was told the heartbreaking news by my grandma. It's something I can never truly understand, but I've always felt his absence deeply. Over the years, I've had a couple of strange encounters involving him that I still think about. When I was 12, my mom, my sisters, and I moved into a new house. I'm 34 now, but I still remember that time clearly. The house we moved into was in an older neighborhood, and I later found out that it was just across the street from the house where my dad had passed away. My mom's best friend, Maria, lived right across from us, next door to the house where my dad had died. One day, Maria was hosting a birthday party for her daughter. We weren't able to attend, but everyone else was outside, enjoying the sunshine, music, and food. While they were out there, Maria went inside to grab more food to put out. As she walked down the hall, she noticed a man walking past her and disappearing into a room. She thought it was odd since everyone was outside, and she didn't recognize him. Maria walked over to the room, but when she opened the door, it was empty. She thought that was strange but went back outside to the party. Later, when Maria was telling my mom about the strange man she had seen, my mom, who always loved a good ghost story, was very curious. She asked Maria to describe what he looked like. Maria said he had long black curly hair, pulled back in a ponytail, a light complexion, jeans, and a white t-shirt. My mom's face went pale, and she just stared at Maria for a moment. The description was exactly what my dad used to look like, right down to the clothes he always wore. He passed away in 1977, but somehow it felt like he was still around. It made me a little sad that I never got to see him myself, but at the same time, I think there must be a reason for that. The second time something happened was years later, after I moved to a different state, away from my family. One night, a friend of mine and I were sitting on the deck, enjoying a drink and the peaceful evening. My friend is very sensitive, and spirits seemed to be drawn to her. As we were sitting there, she suddenly asked me if I knew that I had a spirit attached to me. She said she had seen him around me before and wanted to know if I felt his presence. I always did. It felt like a sense of peace and warmth, like someone was watching over me. I asked her to describe him. I can't see him, but I always feel him. Her description was the same one that Maria had given me. The chills I felt were comforting in a way. It was as if my dad was still here with me, watching over me, just like he used to. There's something so peaceful about knowing he's still here in some way, even though I can't see him. It's a feeling I'll always carry with me. I grew up in a small 3-bedroom house in a little town in Colorado. I don't remember having any unusual experiences before we moved into this house. But over the years, something began to change. My story is about a young boy my nephew has come to call Harold. When I was growing up there, I didn't know anything about Harold's presence. The only feelings I had were of an older male and female energy. But after I moved out and my sister and I began to have our own children, I started to notice something strange. Our kids, who range in age from 8 to 12 years old, yes, there are 6 of them, began to experience things that I hadn't when I was younger. The laundry room is in the basement, and for some reason, that's where I feel Harold the most. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, but things began to get more interesting when my daughter started refusing to go down there by herself. I never told my kids about my ghostly experiences growing up. I just didn't think it was something I should share. I didn't want to scare them, and I wasn't sure how they would react. But my daughter and my nephew are the only ones who've actually seen Harold. One day, while we were visiting my family, my daughter decided to be brave and go downstairs by herself. She was reading a book at the time, not really paying close attention to anything around her. Then she saw a boy crawl from the laundry room through the family room. She thought it was one of her brothers, so she yelled at him, telling him to leave her alone and that she needed some time by herself. But when she got no response, she walked over to the bathroom, thinking maybe he'd gone in there. When she opened the door, it was empty. She walked through the entire basement, calling out, but there was no one there. It was just her, all alone. Naturally, this freaked her out, and she ran upstairs, refusing to go back down for the rest of our visit, which lasted 4 days. This happened several more times. Every time Harold shows himself, he crawls on the ground, army style, on his belly. After crawling, he gets up and runs straight to the bathroom. It's such an odd thing to happen, and it's always the same behavior. I've never seen Harold myself, so I trust my daughter's account, knowing she's being honest and not making things up. Over the years, I have been tormented by something, an entity that's not a ghost. I know the difference. I'm an empath, so I can sense human spirits, and this thing is far different. It's something dark, and it's been haunting the women in my family for at least 6 generations. We've tried everything we could think of to release it, but all our efforts have failed. At first, it started with strange occurrences at night, lights turning on and off, footsteps when no one was around, shadows hovering over the bed, scratching noises on the wall, and objects moving on their own. It came and went in bursts, and every time, it grew more unsettling. We blessed the house and my body, my soul. We even performed a ritual to get rid of it. It worked for a while, but eventually, it came back angrier than before. There are 3 main experiences I want to share, but they're not the only ones I've had with this thing. Let me begin with the most terrifying. This entity likes to attack when I'm in that half-awake, half-asleep state. It presses down on my body with such weight that I can't move, can't breathe, can't speak. It's like I'm screaming with all my might, but no one can hear me. When it releases me, I shoot up out of bed, gasping for air, screaming as loud as I can. No matter how hard I try to fight, I can't move until it's done. In July of 2008, it felt like it was trying to possess me. It was an overwhelming, suffocating feeling, like it wanted to jump into my body. I had to fight it off with prayer, and that night, people around us saw shadows and heard banging coming from inside our house. It started around 3 a.m. I'd been having horrible dreams all night, and though my husband brushed it off as just a bad dream, I knew something more sinister had happened. After that, I reached out to spiritualists and religious advisors. The house was cleansed and blessed, and so were my body, soul, and mind. For a while, it was gone. But of course, it came back, and this time, it was furious. In September 2009, the entity returned with even more aggression. It didn't just attack me. It went after 2 other people too, both from my family. It used my niece's greatest fear against her, stopping her from breathing and holding her down. Then it showed itself to my husband as some sort of androgynous figure in a white robe, holding him down, keeping him from moving, breathing, or speaking. Then that very same night, it came after me again. I was in that half-dream state again when I heard growling from underneath the couch. My husband and I had fallen asleep in the living room, and I glanced at the couch. That's when I saw it, something like a zombie creature glowing with red light, emerging from underneath the couch. It reached out, grabbed my arm, and began pulling me toward it. My husband felt me being pulled across the floor and thought I was moving toward the couch. He grabbed my hips to pull me back, but there was resistance, like something was fighting him. He had to pull me hard. I ended up sitting straight up, screaming. I could feel him pulling, and I could see him, but I couldn't move. I screamed and prayed, hoping someone could help me. When it was over, I found bruises on my arms in the shape of fingers. Since then, things have quieted down, but it returned at the end of December 2009, continuing into January 2010. This time, it showed itself in 2 different forms. The first was this green, cartoonish blob-like creature. The second was a figure dressed like a man, but it was strange. The more I focused on it, the more angry it became. It began emitting a loud, vibrating noise inside my head that made my head shake uncontrollably. My husband had to wake me up, and when I did, I had a taste of blood in my mouth. Now, it visits almost every night. I hear it whispering my name. Sometimes, it even strokes my hair. I've talked to many people about this, and what we know for sure is that this is not a ghost. It's something else entirely, something that was never human. The only thing that keeps it from going further is prayer in Jesus' name. I've tried almost everything. I've reached out to people, researched, and done everything I could think of. But now, it follows me even when we move. I don't know what it is, but it has followed us since we moved in December of 2009, and now there's even the smell of cologne around the house. It's getting more active, and I fear for my safety. 3 a.m. seems to be its most active time. If anyone has any advice or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. I just want to be free from this thing, once and for all. My name is Amanda, and this is the first time I've ever shared my experiences with ghosts. I've had a lot of strange things happen to me throughout my life, and I feel like now is the time to talk about them. I've been seeing and sensing spirits since I was very young. I remember when I was 3 years old, and my mom recalls something strange when I was 4. We were living in Big Pond, Pennsylvania, and my great-grandmother was very ill. One day, I was having a tea party and placed a picture of my great-grandmother across from me. My mom came into the room and asked what I was doing. I told her, I'm playing with Grandma before she dies. She was confused and asked what I meant, and I told her that my great-grandmother was going to die. About 5 minutes later, we got a call from the hospital telling us that she had passed away. My mom thought it was just a coincidence, but I knew it was more than that. I had seen her spirit that day, and I knew she was going to die. But here's where it gets really strange. For the past 5 years, I've been seeing and hearing spirits constantly. On my birthday, March 28, 2004, something terrifying happened. I had fallen asleep at around 9:00 p.m., and I felt something grab my arm. At first, I thought it was my mom checking on me, so I didn't think much of it, but suddenly, I was thrown off my bed and into a mirror across the room. I blacked out and ended up lying on the floor the rest of the night. When I woke up, I saw that my arm was covered in glass from the mirror, but when I looked at the mirror itself, there was no damage to it at all. There were no scratches, no missing pieces, and it wasn't broken. I don't know why this happened, and I don't know what type of spirit caused it, but since that night, I've been seeing a black shadowy figure everywhere I go. I can't hear him or make contact with him, but I can sense when he's nearby. I told my best friend Mason about all this, and he suggested I share my experiences with others who might have gone through similar things. Another strange thing that's been happening is a recurring dream I've had for about a week now. It's the same every time, and the ending is always the same. The dream starts with a clock striking 7:00 p.m., the time I was born. It shows my friends around me with a cake, like it's a birthday party. I blow out the candles, and then I go up to my room to grab something, but I can never figure out what I'm supposed to be grabbing. When I go downstairs, everyone is lying on the floor in the living room, dead, with pieces of my mirror in their necks. In the dream's final moment, I always see a piece of my mirror flying toward me, and the date 03/28/2010 appears. That's my birthday next year. I don't know what this dream means, but it feels like it could be some kind of warning. Lastly, I've been sensing the presence of a small boy, about 7 years old, since September 21. Today is September 30th, and I only sense him when I walk into my living room, usually sitting on the couch under the window. I haven't seen him, but I feel like he's always there. I don't know why I've been experiencing these spirits, especially in the past 5 years. I do remember a few times when I was younger, but it's never been as frequent as it is now. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. This weekend, the strange occurrences in my life reached a level I never thought possible. The physical and mental toll has been overwhelming, and honestly, I don't know how much worse it can get. What happened on Sunday morning still feels impossible to believe, even for me. But before I get to that, I need to start from the beginning. On Friday night, August 7th. That night, I was watching a movie with my brother. It was around 11:00 p.m., and he was already dozing off. I turned off the movie, carried him upstairs, and tucked him into bed. As I made my way back, I turned off a few lights, ready to sleep myself, until I saw it. It was another one of those shadows that usually vanish before I can focus on them. But this time, it didn't disappear. Instead, it stayed. Worse, it started taking shape. At first, it was just a dark figure, but then it became more human-like. The last thing to form were its eyes, not the glowing red eyes you'd expect from some horror movie demon, but bloodshot, dimly glowing eyes filled with pure hatred. It moved closer, not walking but gliding. And yet, I could hear footsteps. I was frozen, unable to move as it came so close that I could have reached out and touched it, if I weren't paralyzed with fear. Then, its eyes widened unnaturally, rolling back into its head. In an instant, it split into 4 shadows, each one shooting off in a different direction before vanishing completely. That was the worst of Friday night, aside from the usual poltergeist activity. But seeing that entity in what I assume is its true form left me shaken. The next major event happened on Saturday, August 8th. I had a morning shift at work from 9:00 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. By the time I got home, I was drained, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The night before was still weighing on me, so I decided to take a shower, hoping to clear my mind. Of course, as soon as I glanced at the mirror, the same mutilated faces appeared, just for a second, before vanishing again. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but somehow it scares me more each time, because every time it happens, it confirms that whatever is haunting me is still here. Halfway through my shower, I heard glass shattering. It was loud, so loud that I could have sworn it came from inside the bathroom. Heart pounding. I peeked out from behind the curtain, expecting to see broken glass everywhere, but everything was intact. I was about to convince myself I imagined it when I saw it again. The shadow figure, the same haunting eyes. It stood there in the doorway, staring at me, completely still. For a full minute, it didn't move. Then, without warning, it floated upward and disappeared into the ceiling. I was shaking as I finished my shower and got dressed. I needed a distraction, something normal. So I sat down to watch TV, hoping to calm my nerves. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a sharp, powerful impact on my nose, like I'd just been punched, but there was no one there. Blood poured from my nose, and it took nearly half an hour to stop the bleeding. Just as I started to relax, I felt something else, a sudden, searing pain across my back. I rushed to the nearest mirror and turned around. 3 deep, distinct slash marks ran across my skin. At that point, I had no choice. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the emergency room. When the doctor asked what happened, I told them I fell on a pitchfork. I didn't know what else to say. How could I explain that I was attacked by something I couldn't even see? And then came Sunday morning, August 9th. I woke up feeling strange, as if I weren't fully conscious. The room around me didn't feel familiar. It didn't feel like mine. As my vision cleared, I realized where I was. The haunted house. I had no idea how I got there. No memory of leaving my bed. No explanation. One moment, I was asleep in my own home, and the next, I was waking up in the one place I feared the most. Panic hit me instantly. My house was 5 miles away, and I had no choice but to walk. With every step, my mind raced with emotions: fear, denial, anger. I kept asking myself how this was even possible. Was I losing my mind? Had I been sleepwalking? Or was something much worse at play? Since that morning, things have been quiet. No strange sounds, no shadows lurking in the corners, no sudden attacks. But I don't think that means it's over. I wrote this the same day it happened, while everything is still fresh in my mind. If anything else happens, I'll write again. But after this weekend, one thing is clear. Whatever is haunting me is more than just an angry spirit. It's something much worse. Have you ever experienced anything like this? Let me know. Maybe I'm not alone in this. My girlfriend and I are both chefs in our early 30s, and we have a 9-month-old daughter. She's always been a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, but I believed in ghosts for as long as I can remember. I used to tell myself that if I ever saw one, I wouldn't be afraid. I wanted an experience of my own. I grew up in Denver, and the only haunted place I ever really heard about was the Stanley Hotel. That changed when my girlfriend reconnected with an old friend who had moved to Evergreen. Her friend's house was old, really old. It had a certain energy about it, something hard to describe. We noticed right away that the house was made almost entirely of quartz. I'd read that quartz is believed to amplify paranormal energy, so I asked about the construction. That's when she mentioned the Brook Forest Inn across the street. The house was originally part of its homestead, and the inn itself was also built on quartz. She casually mentioned that the place was haunted and even offered to book us a room for the night. We couldn't say no. From the moment we stepped inside, the inn felt different. It had this deep sense of history, like the walls had stories to tell. The staff gave us a tour, and we were immediately drawn to 2 places: the basement, which was off limits to the public, and the Dagoya room, a place tied to a tragic story about a child who had died there long ago. Our room for the night was the Ambassador Suite. As it turned out, this room had its own dark past. A stable boy named Carl had fallen in love with a maid named Jessica. Their love was forbidden, and in a tragic moment of rage and guilt, Carl strangled Jessica, then took his own life. The weight of the story sat heavy in the air. It didn't help that throughout the evening, both my girlfriend and I had this unsettling feeling of being watched. Our daughter, usually so predictable, kept staring at corners of the room, smiling at something behind us. It wasn't like her at all. I snapped some photos around the inn, the basement, the dining hall, the hallways. When I looked back at them, there were orbs in several of the shots. That was strange enough, but when we were near the dining hall, I suddenly felt an intense chill move through me, a full-body coldness that made me stop in my tracks. Still, the night moved on. Eventually, we went to bed. I woke up drenched in sweat. The room had been comfortable, maybe even a little chilly, when we first lay down, but now both my girlfriend and I were overheated. She sat up, turned on the fan, and we tried to go back to sleep. That's when I heard it. A loud bang at our double doors. I froze. We were the only guests in the entire building. The staff had locked up hours ago. There shouldn't have been anyone else here. I lay in bed, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Then I heard it again. Whispers. Faint just at the edge of hearing. Soft giggles. Then footsteps. Heavy ones. The bathroom door creaked open, then shut, then creaked open again. I knew for a fact that all the windows in our room were closed. There was no draft, no explanation. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but after an hour, I finally shook my girlfriend awake and asked if she had heard anything. She groggily told me no, muttered something about the inn being old, and told me to go back to sleep. The next morning, she admitted she had heard things too. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember was my daughter screaming. She never does that. Not like this. It was a cry so sharp and sudden that it sent a chill through me. We picked her up, brought her into bed with us, and tried to calm her down. Then it happened. I got this overwhelming feeling of dread. It wasn't like fear. It was worse, like something was silently telling me to look at the bathroom door. I didn't want to, but I had to. Slowly, I turned my head. At first, there was nothing, just the dark outline of the shower curtain. Then, a light appeared. It was a soft green glow, floating just above the shower curtain. It wasn't like a lamp or a reflection. It didn't light up the room at all. It was like the light existed only for me, as if it was looking at me. I wanted to move. I wanted to grab my phone and take a picture, but I couldn't. I just lay there, staring at it, watching as it hovered in place for what felt like 10 whole minutes. And then, it was gone. I finally worked up the courage to get up and turn on the light. I checked the bathroom, the hallway, the windows. Nothing. There was nothing that could have caused what I saw. I don't know what it was, but I do know one thing. I'll be going back. Next time, I'll bring more equipment. Next time, I'll be ready. But will it? What do you think? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? This story begins 8.5 years ago when we first moved into our home. My son, who was 4 at the time, started seeing someone he called Sean. Every night, Sean would appear to him. The disturbances became so overwhelming that I had to ask Sean to leave. He did, but the strange occurrences never stopped. Over the years, friends and relatives have refused to visit our house because of what they'd witnessed. One of the most unsettling incidents involved a stuffed animal, one without any mechanical parts, moving across the floor on its own. My oldest child has also seen the same figure that I've spotted more than once. We once invited a ghost hunting team to investigate. They captured hours of video, but refused to return. Their equipment picked up unusual electronic activity, and they later told us that our house was home to 5 spirits, all male, ranging from young boys to adults, seeking help. More recently, a relative living in another state reached out to me. He's been plagued by nightmares of a spirit named Adam, a child with an unusually strong presence. He also described a man with dark intentions. This revelation unsettled me, especially since he had no prior knowledge of our experiences. Clairvoyance runs in my family. My 2-year-old has started talking to unseen figures, sometimes carrying full conversations with them. In the mornings, my oldest and I often wake up at exactly 3 a.m. to strange noises or fleeting shadows. Even those who don't believe in ghosts have admitted that something feels off in this house. We have never found any records of deaths here. However, we did confirm that a man named Sean, matching the description of the one my son used to see, lived in this house in the 1980s. He was the son of a minister. The ghost hunting team gave us one undeniable piece of evidence: a photo showing a circular orb floating near the basement ceiling. There was nothing in the room that could explain it. We once had another picture, taken in broad daylight, showing a gray, childlike figure following my daughter on our patio. But somehow, that photo vanished. The team's EVP, electronic voice phenomena, equipment also recorded significant activity, but we were never given access to review what was captured. Some of their devices, which should have turned off when detecting no activity, remained on continuously in certain areas of the house. One of the more unusual discoveries was made by a sensitive who accompanied the team. In a particular part of the house, he saw many red millipedes crawling in one concentrated area. Later, I learned that red millipedes are sometimes associated with paranormal activity. That same spot remains one of the most active places in our home. Electronic disturbances happen regularly. Toys that need to be physically touched to make noise will suddenly activate on their own. TVs turn off, only to switch back on by themselves. Despite all of this, I've been told the spirits aren't here to harm us. Instead, they seem to be drawn to us, perhaps because of the psychic energy within our family. Each night, I pray over my children, asking for protection against anything negative. We are a Christian family, but we also understand that some things in this world defy explanation. We've blessed our home many times, and we've sought help from our church. I've always had an instinct about who I can talk to regarding these experiences. At one point, I confided in someone at our church, someone most people would never expect to have the ability to cleanse a space. When we've asked spirits to leave, we've seen some success, but new entities always seem to take their place. This has led me to wonder if there is a portal in our home. For years, most of the activity was strongest between September and January, but lately, it has become a year-round presence. The most recent event involved my oldest child waking up at 3 a.m. to find the dark outline of an adult-sized figure standing over her. It then knelt by her bedside. Instead of feeling afraid, she simply closed her eyes and began to pray, more annoyed than frightened. Another presence appeared about a year ago, a woman who seemed particularly interested in a laptop in my daughter's room. She never returned after that night. A recent reading suggested that this woman was seeking my daughter's help and has now moved on. I don't know what more we can do. I just want to keep my family safe. If there is a way to better protect our home, I would like to know. I'm in a new house now, but still in Denver, only about 30 to 45 minutes from my hometown, where all my past experiences took place. The last house I lived in with my mother was where the most activity with Jerry happened. That house has since been sold, and my mom moved out of state. But lately, I've had a few run-ins with Jerry again. Only this time, he's not alone. Before I get into that, there's something I never mentioned before, something I had almost forgotten about until recently. Back in my hometown, there's an event held every year called the Art Fest. It's nothing out of the ordinary, just artists selling their work. But my parents had this framed advertisement for the event. They had it since I was about 4 or 5 years old. It looked normal at first. The main picture wasn't important, but across the top were 2 rows of black checker tiles. 4 of them contained small images of William Shakespeare. It wasn't creepy, at least not at first. For years they kept that picture hanging by a corner window in our old house, the same house where I had my first encounter with Jerry. But at some point, they moved it. They hung it at the top of the stairs leading down to the basement. And that's when things got weird. I always felt uneasy in that basement, but it was different when that picture was there. It was like the energy shifted. And here's the strangest part. Whenever I looked at it, something about the Shakespeare images would change. Sometimes there was only one. Other times there was an extra face, a twisted, almost demonic-looking one, in one of the black squares. Sometimes all the faces disappeared completely. That never happened when the picture was hanging by the window, only in the basement. Our dogs noticed it too. They would randomly start whimpering and staring at the basement door, as if something was on the other side. More than once, I saw one of our dogs wake up from a deep sleep, suddenly alert, and glare at the basement door, growling. She wouldn't go near it. She just sat there, growling for what felt like minutes before finally sneaking past it to leave the room. I had almost forgotten about that picture until my mom was packing up before she moved. I found it again, and the moment my eyes landed on it, I felt this deep, overwhelming fear. The kind of fear that you don't question. You just feel it. I couldn't even look at it. I told my mom, and she decided to get rid of it. Ever since then, my nightmares have been worse. They always involve Jerry. But now, he's not alone. There's someone else with him. I've never seen this second figure before. He's shorter than Jerry, a little heavier with short hair. I can't make out his face. Jerry is tall, thin, clean-shaven, and wears a tank top with camo pants. The other guy wears a t-shirt and baggy jeans. That's all I can see. At first, he only showed up in my dreams. But then, one night I woke up, and they were both standing at the foot of my bed. The room was dimly lit by a small nightlight, so I could only see their silhouettes. They didn't move at first, but then, within seconds, they both bolted, one to the left, one to the right, disappearing at what felt like an impossible speed. I jerked my head in both directions, trying to catch a glimpse of them, but by the time my eyes adjusted, there was nothing, just an empty room. Then, the strangest thing happened. The next day, I was on my computer doing something completely unrelated when I typed the name Miguel. I don't even remember why. Something random on Wikipedia. The second I typed it, I heard that familiar cough, the one I always associate with Jerry. I froze. I typed Miguel again. That time, I heard a creak in the hallway, like footsteps, but I hadn't heard anyone come up the stairs, and you can always hear when someone does. I hesitated. Then, out loud, I said the name. Instantly, a cold chill ran down my spine, not just the kind you get from a draft, but the kind that fills you with pure fear. And then, I felt something, a presence, right behind me, close enough to touch me. I spun around. No one was there, but I swear I heard the faintest sound, like a small gust of wind moving through the room. I didn't say the name again after that. I don't know what any of this means. Could Miguel be Jerry's real name? Or does it belong to someone else? And who is this second figure? I have no memory of ever seeing them before in my life, yet here they are, haunting me, following me, showing up in my own home. I still don't have the answers. Every time I think I do, something even stranger happens. For now, I'm calling the second guy Bobby, because honestly, I don't know what else to call him. Camping while pregnant? Bad idea. I was in my first trimester, dealing with relentless morning sickness, but my husband and I still decided to camp along the Colorado River. I don't remember the exact location, but looking back, I should have turned to him and said, "Let's go home." The first sign? A huge dead snake hanging from a tree. Maybe it was a warning. I sure didn't take it as one. It was hot, dusty, and miserable. The river water looked muddy, and my nausea never let up. All I wanted was a bed, air conditioning, and something to settle my stomach. Instead, I had a musty-smelling tent and a sleeping bag that felt like a torture device on my overly sensitive body. My husband tried to be patient, but I wasn't exactly pleasant company. That evening, we hiked up a short trail to a hilltop peak. The view was breathtaking, rolling waters of the river against the setting sun. I tried to appreciate it, but the nausea wouldn't let up. Eventually, I couldn't fight it anymore. My stomach lurched, and I knew I was about to be sick. Frustrated with me, my husband started back down the hill without me. I was just as annoyed with him, so I stubbornly stayed behind, taking my time descending. The sun had set completely by the time I made my way down, and suddenly I realized just how dark it was. Pitch black. No campfires, no distant flashlight beams, just endless, suffocating darkness. I tried to retrace my steps when I heard it. A heavy, shuffling sound. Someone, or something, was coming toward me, crunching over rocks, snapping twigs. Then, heavy breathing. My heart pounded. This wasn't my husband. He was tall and slender, and I knew the sound of his footsteps, light, quick, wearing sneakers. These steps were slow, deliberate, heavy boots dragging against the dirt. I dropped to the ground, curling into myself, hoping whoever it was would pass me by. My ears strained against the silence. No more footsteps, just an eerie stillness. Then I saw it, a soft glow to my left, floating, moving, shifting. It was bluish white, with a faint yellow mist around the edges. I knew that glow. I'd seen it before. Some spirits asked for help. Others, torment. I should have stayed put, but something in me knew I had to go to it. As I stood, a wave of nausea slammed into me. And then, the smell. Death. It wrapped around me, thick and suffocating, making me double over and retch onto my shoes. The second the vomit hit the ground, the glowing figure snapped to attention. He was massive, at least 6'3", 350 pounds. His face was round, expression blank, but his eyes, black as night. And then I saw it, the bullet hole in his temple. He was panicking, mumbling about the pain in his head, clutching his ears like he could block it out. I asked him what he last remembered, but he just kept shaking his head, trying to force a memory that wouldn't come. I reached out. "Do you know you're dead?" He froze. "I'm not dead," he whispered. "I'm as alive as you are." I held out my arm. "Then touch me." He refused, so I reached forward. My hand passed right through him. His eyes widened. I saw it then, the resignation, the moment he knew. "What year is it?" I asked. 1937. I swallowed hard. "It's 1975. A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he asked, "Where's my wife, my children?" "They're waiting for you," I told him. It's what I always say, to help them move on. He hesitated, but eventually, he stepped into the unknown. Slowly, hesitantly, but he went. I never got his name. I never knew why he had that bullet wound. And in the end, none of it mattered. He was finally where he belonged. 7 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl menace 7 pounds, 7 ounces. She turns 33 this Christmas. I've never really shared my experiences outside of close friends and family, mostly because when I have, people either don't believe me or think I'm just trying to tell a good story. But after reading others' experiences, I feel like this is a place where people might actually be open to what I have to say. This all takes place in my family's home in Colorado, a ranch-style house with a main floor and a basement. The strange activity always seemed to happen in 2 places, the guest bedroom on the north corner of the house and my own bedroom in the basement, which was directly below it. I want to be clear, I'm only sharing the things I can't explain. Sure, sometimes a book falls off a shelf on its own, and there's probably a logical reason, but the events I'm about to tell you, there's no way I can chalk them up to coincidence. The first thing happened when I was in 8th grade. I was walking up the driveway, flipping through the mail, when I heard the front door slam. I looked up just in time to see a shadow move across the front door window. I didn't think much of it. I figured my mom was home, maybe closing the door behind her. But when I reached the house, the door was locked. I laughed to myself. Real funny, I thought. Mom's messing with me. I unlocked the door, expecting her to jump out and scare me. But when I stepped inside, the front room was empty. I called out, telling her it wasn't funny. No answer. I walked to her bedroom. Nothing. Her study? Empty. That's when I got nervous. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, thinking maybe someone had broken in. I searched the entire house, every room, every closet. Nothing. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I imagined the shadow. But as time went on, things only got worse. Not long after, my parents remodeled the basement so my brother and I could have our own rooms. They knocked down walls, creating big common areas and separate bedrooms for us. My mom was excited about the remodel and would often show it off to her friends. So when I came home from school one day and heard two women talking downstairs, I assumed she was giving another tour. I ran down the stairs, heading straight for my bedroom, where the voices were coming from. But when I stepped inside, the room was empty. The voices stopped the second I entered. The silence was deafening. I felt my stomach drop. Every hair on my body stood on end. I didn't stick around. I bolted upstairs and out of the basement. After that, I started feeling uneasy in my room. So I decided to do something about it. I had heard that some cultures believe masks can ward off spirits. Desperate for some peace, I put 14 masks above my bed. For a while, nothing happened. Then one day, I walked into my room and found nearly all of them ripped off the wall, thrown across the floor. One was broken in half. I was furious at first. My little brother had to be behind this, right? But he was at school with me all day. I asked my mom. She hadn't touched them. That's when I understood. It was a message. I packed most of the masks away, leaving only 3. Then, feeling ridiculous, I whispered an apology into the empty room. After that, things settled down for about a year. But then, the late night encounters started. By this point, I had mostly gotten used to the idea that my house might be haunted. But I had no idea just how many ghosts I was living with. One night, I fell asleep on the family room couch, my dog curled up beside me. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They came from the guest bedroom. At first, they were slow, steady. Then, suddenly, running. Something was charging through the house, straight toward me. The footsteps were so loud, the glass cabinets shook. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't the only one who heard it. My dog leaped off the couch and ran toward the sound. And then, right before it reached me, it stopped. The only thing I heard was the sharp skid of sneakers on a gym floor. Then, silence. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I got up, turned on every light I could, and sat awake for the rest of the night. At this point, I finally told my mom. She hadn't heard the running, but she did mention something strange. Every morning, the closet doors in the guest bedroom were open, no matter how many times she closed them. She always assumed it was one of us kids, but after hearing my story, she wasn't so sure anymore. Since I finally had someone who believed me, I decided to try making contact. I left out a pen and paper, hoping for a message. Nothing. I set up a recorder to capture any sounds. Still nothing. It was like the spirits knew when I was watching. So I gave up trying. That's when things got weird again. By my junior year of high school, the activity started picking up. One night, I woke up to a faint whispering sound. It was so quiet, like a radio turned to its lowest setting. I smacked my alarm clock, thinking it was on, but the whispering continued. Annoyed, I unplugged the clock. Still there. I turned on my light and started searching. Eventually, I traced the sound to a small soapstone figure on my nightstand. I picked it up. The whispering moved with it. I held the stone in my hand, listening. It was a man's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. At this point, I was exhausted. I didn't know what to do, so I placed the stone on the far side of the room and went back to sleep. And that's when I met her. I never saw her, never heard her move, but I felt her. She was different from the others, curious but not threatening. Sometimes I'd feel her close when I was drifting off to sleep, and once in the quiet darkness, I felt a finger softly touch my cheek. I wanted to believe she meant no harm, but the others, they weren't as kind. After I left for college, I figured the spirits had lost interest in me. I was wrong. One night during break, I woke up in pure panic. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I felt hands around my throat. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow over me, but I wasn't sure. Just when I thought I'd pass out, the grip vanished. Gasping, I ran to the bathroom. In the mirror, I saw faint finger marks on my neck. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe I had somehow choked myself. But deep down, I knew better. Now, years have passed, and the house is quieter now. When I visit, my fiancée and I sleep in the guest bedroom. Sometimes, late at night, we hear the closet doors crack open. She hears it too. I don't feel the spirits as strongly anymore. Maybe they've moved on. Maybe I have. But every time I turn off the lights, I still wonder, what if they're just waiting? Have you ever experienced something like this? Hey everyone, I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I've always believed my great-grandfather was a remarkable man. He was the happiest person I ever knew, always putting family first. He valued every dollar, poured his heart into everything he did, and had an incredible talent for art. Maybe that's why he felt the need to build his home from the ground up. I wish I knew the exact year, but I don't. What I do know is that the house stayed in our family for a long time. It was more than just a house. It was home to generations. My grandmother and her sisters grew up there. My mother spent her childhood within its walls, and my brothers and I called it home for most of our early years. It stood in a historic part of Denver, just a couple of houses down from Molly Brown's home. That little detail isn't important to this story, but I've always thought it was interesting. Some of my earliest memories of the house go back to when I was around 5 or 6. We would visit while my great-grandparents still lived there. The air always carried a mix of cookies and my great-grandmother's perfume. My great-grandfather would be in his chair, sketching with pastels, his fingertips smudged in shades of red and blue. The jazz station played softly in the background, and every so often, he'd hum along, pulling my great-grandmother into a little dance. She'd always laugh and gently push him away, saying, "Oh, Joe, stop," before sitting back down. I suppose I've gone on long enough. Let me tell you about the strange things that happened in that house. My grandmother, who lived there most of her life, says she never experienced anything unusual, but my mother did. When she was about 4, she had an imaginary friend named Tabby. According to my mom, Tabby was behind the strange occurrences in the house. She and her cousin, Teresa, shared a bedroom upstairs with an adjoining bathroom. Every morning, when my mother went to use the bathroom, she would step onto the carpet and find it soaked. She would ask Teresa what happened, but she was always still asleep and swore she hadn't gotten up. This went on for years. Maybe it was just a plumbing issue, or maybe not. My mom also remembers hearing footsteps late at night. They would slowly climb the stairs, pause at the top, and then descend again, just once, always around the same time. But the moment that stayed with her the most happened one afternoon after school. She ran upstairs to drop off her books and stopped cold. On her bed was the clear imprint of a small body, like someone had just been lying there. The pillow had the shape of a resting head pressed into it. She didn't wait around to investigate. She bolted downstairs and refused to sleep on her side of the room after that. Not long after, my grandparents moved to California for my grandfather's job. The house stayed in the family, and years later, after my great-grandfather passed away, my parents moved in. My brothers took the upstairs room where my mother and her cousin had slept, and I had my great-grandmother's old bedroom downstairs. That's when I started experiencing things myself. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I would hear a soft humming coming from the living room. The sound was gentle, almost comforting. But every time I got up to check, the room was empty. It wasn't just me. One of my great-grandfather's favorite things was an old, ugly knit tapestry of an owl. He loved it, but no one else did. After he passed, we tucked it away in a closet. One evening, we came home to find it hanging on the doorknob, right where he had always kept it. My mom believed it was Grandpa Joe. My dad refused to accept that. The tapestry was moved to the basement, and we didn't speak of it again. Over time, the odd things happened less and less. Or maybe I just stopped paying attention. One weekend, I had stayed up late watching TV on the couch, like I often did. Eventually, I heard my dad's voice telling me to go to bed. Half asleep, I obeyed without thinking. The next morning, I casually mentioned it to my mom. She looked at me strangely. "Your dad wasn't home last night," she said. That's when I remembered. My dad and brothers had gone camping that weekend. As I got older, I became more interested in art, just like my great-grandfather. One day, I was working on a drawing for school, but got frustrated when it didn't turn out the way I wanted. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash before heading out to a friend's house. When I came back a few hours later, the drawing was sitting neatly on the center of my bed. No one had been home. My mother, of course, thought it was Grandpa Joe, reminding me not to give up. Shortly after that, my great-grandmother passed away in a nursing home. Not long after, we started smelling that familiar mix of cookies and perfume again. It would drift through the house, sometimes in my bedroom, sometimes near the front door. And then there was Christmas. Every Christmas Eve, my parents left holiday music playing overnight. It was tradition. But that particular year, when we woke up, the music wasn't Christmas songs. It was jazz. The old kind my great-grandfather used to listen to. The tuner hadn't moved, and that station had played Christmas music every year without fail. We sat there, listening. About half an hour later, the station switched back to Christmas music on its own. Life moved on. My brothers and I grew up. My parents' relationship grew tense, and eventually, they separated. The house was sold. There had been too many arguments, too much negativity. Maybe if my great-grandparents were still there in spirit, they had decided to leave. We never had another experience after that. Years later, my mother's curiosity about the paranormal led her to visit a psychic. Without knowing anything about our past, the psychic described my mother's imaginary friend, Tabby, in detail. Even knew her name. It made us wonder, was Tabby behind the strange things all along? Was she the one who left the imprint on my mother's bed? And then my mother told me something else. She often dreams of the house. The details are vivid. She can feel the cool wood of the stairs beneath her feet, hear the creaks of the floorboards. Sometimes she wonders if, in those dreams, she's not just remembering the house. Maybe she's there in some way, haunting it herself. And if that's possible, what if that was the case all along? What if the footsteps we heard late at night were not from a ghost of the past, but someone from the future? Someone dreaming of the house, walking those same steps over and over again. I don't have the answers, but I do wonder, if there's another family living there now, do they hear footsteps too? And if they do, whose footsteps are they? This happened about 4 years ago when I moved to New York with my girlfriend, Lisa, to start a new life. Since we were trying to save money, we stayed with my mom in her new apartment in the Bronx. The building was old, probably close to 100 years. It was a small one-bedroom place, so Lisa and I slept on an air mattress in the living room while my mom had the bedroom. For the first few months, everything was normal. Then, strange things started happening. The first time it happened, Lisa and I had just gone to bed. I've always had trouble falling asleep, so I was lying there with my eyes closed when I heard breathing. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was Lisa. But then I heard it again, and again. It was deep and steady, like someone standing nearby. I asked Lisa why she was breathing so hard, but she didn't answer. When I turned to check, she was sound asleep. Feeling uneasy, I decided to investigate. I walked around the apartment but found nothing. I even peeked into my mom's room to see if she was awake, but she was fast asleep too, confused but too tired to keep searching. I gave up and lay back down. It took me over an hour to finally fall asleep. The next morning, I didn't mention it to Lisa or my mom. I told myself it was probably just my imagination. A few days passed, and I almost forgot about it. Then, one night, it happened again. Only this time, the breathing was even louder. I sat up, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but nothing made sense. After about half an hour, the noise just stopped. The next morning, I finally said something. I told my mom and Lisa what I had been hearing. They both just laughed. My mom said she had never heard anything strange before I moved in. That night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep in the living room. Instead, I stayed up playing video games in my mom's room while she and Lisa slept. I didn't want to hear that noise again. I figured if I stayed awake long enough, I would eventually get tired enough to fall asleep without worrying about it. Then, out of nowhere, the stereo in the living room turned on by itself. The sudden noise startled me. At first, I didn't want to go near it, but it was too loud to ignore. When I finally got up to check, I thought maybe I had accidentally set an alarm on it, but I hadn't. Then I noticed the time. It was 1:30 a.m., the same time I usually heard the breathing. That night, I slept in my mom's room. The following night, Lisa and I were back in the living room. I was afraid I'd hear the breathing again, so I pulled the sheet over my head. I was lying on my left side, and Lisa's back was against mine. Then it started. This time, the breathing moved around the room. It had never done that before. My heart pounded as I listened. It got closer, then even closer. I wanted it to stop, but it didn't. Instead, it grew louder, almost right next to me. Then I felt it. A hand, lightly stroking my arm. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt actual fingers brushed against my arm through the thin sheet. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The next morning, I couldn't wait to tell my mom and Lisa what had happened. But just like before, they didn't believe me. Frustrated, I went to take a shower. That's when I noticed something on my arm, the same spot where I had felt the touch. The skin was discolored. I showed it to my mom and Lisa. They couldn't explain it. They still didn't believe my story, but they admitted the mark was strange. After that, nothing ever happened to me again in that apartment. But I've never forgotten those nights, and I don't think I ever will. After my mom and her boyfriend broke up, we moved in with my grandparents in Redlands, California. I had lived there a few years before, and even back then, I had noticed weird things happening in the house. Of course, nobody believed me, so I just kept it to myself. Sometimes, when I was alone watching TV, I would hear footsteps upstairs in my grandparents' room, just pacing back and forth. After a while, it got annoying, so I called out, "Who's there?" And just like that, the footsteps stopped. I brushed it off and tried to ignore it. Another time, I was in the kitchen making something to eat when I saw someone run into the office. Thinking it was my grandma, I called out to her, but there was no answer. So I walked over to check. No one was there. At night, I often heard footsteps going up and down the stairs. They would only stop if I spoke out loud. One of the scariest things that happened when I was younger was when I was playing Nintendo in one of the rooms. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman in a white dress standing on the balcony, just staring at me. My heart dropped. I bolted out of there like a kid running to a buffet. I told my mom, but she just shrugged it off and said I was imagining things. I tried to let it go and went back to my game, but a few minutes later, I saw her again. After that, I refused to sleep in that room ever again. The scariest experience of all happened 3 years ago. I had just come home late, around 2 a.m., after hanging out with some friends. I walked upstairs to my room, and my dog, Madison, was waiting for me. I played with him for a few minutes when, all of a sudden, I heard the sliding door in the room next door open. Then, footsteps. Madison started barking at the wall that connected to the other room. I figured it was just my grandma closing the balcony door, so I got up to say hi. But when I opened the door, the room was completely dark. The sliding door was shut and locked. I ran back to my room, turned on the radio, the TV, and left all the lights on. I was not taking any chances. The next morning, I asked my grandma if she had been in the room next to mine. She looked at me and said, "I haven't been in that room all day." That freaked me out even more. Now I live in another city, but I still work in Redlands. When I'm too tired to drive home, I sometimes stay the night at my grandparents' house. A few weeks ago, I crashed on the couch there. I woke up 4 times during the night, each time to the sound of footsteps, and I was the only one in the house. It started around midnight. At first, I thought I heard my mom upstairs, rustling through the trash like she was getting ready to take it out. It was such a small noise, something easy to ignore, but something about it felt off. I went up to check, expecting to see her in the kitchen, but she wasn't there. The house was quiet. She was in bed. By 12:30, an uneasy feeling settled over me. It was subtle at first, like the air in the room had shifted. The cat noticed it too. His ears twitched, his body tense, like he was watching something I couldn't see. That's when I started hearing noises again. Slow, deliberate sounds from upstairs. I tried to brush it off, went back down, but the feeling stayed with me. Almost an hour passed. Then, at exactly 1:00 a.m., that same heavy presence returned. This time, it was stronger. And then, I heard it. A cough. A low, raspy sound, like someone struggling to breathe. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the stairs, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moving just beyond my sight. Without thinking, I ran after it, chasing it up the steps. But by the time I reached the top, it was already gone. Then I heard it again, footsteps fast, running across the kitchen and into the family room. I turned the corner, but all I saw was darkness. Then I noticed something strange. The deck light was on, and standing just outside the glass door was him. I couldn't fully make out his features, but he was there, still, silent, watching me. His form was blurry, almost transparent, like he was made of smoke. I took a slow step forward, barely daring to breathe. And just like that, he faded, dissolving into the air like he had never been there at all. That was the last thing that happened that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. It had been a long time since anything like this had happened. For years, things had been quiet. But now, for some reason, it was starting again, and I don't know why. I don't even know what this thing is. Calling it a ghost doesn't feel right. It feels like something more. I've seen him before. I know what he looks like. He's about my height, maybe a little shorter. Gray skin, almost bald. Dead, lifeless eyes. He always wears the same thing. A tank top, camo pants. And when he's near, I hear it, the cough. Deep, rough, like a heavy smoker. And lately, I've started hearing sneezing too. It's not just seeing him, it's the things he does. The hallucinations, the shifting shadows. I see things that shouldn't be there. I'll glance in the mirror, and for a split second, I'm not looking at myself. I'm looking at him. Or I'll see him standing behind me in the reflection, only for him to vanish when I turn around. Sometimes I see blood dripping down the walls in the mirror, but when I turn to look, nothing. Sometimes, if I'm really tired, I'll see a hand reaching around a doorway. Or, in the middle of the night, my bedroom door will slowly creak open, and I'll see him standing there in the darkness, watching. Just watching. Other nights, the basement feels wrong. In the shadows, I swear I see shapes, bodies, hanging from the ceiling. At first, they look like nothing, but then I focus and I see them clearly, and just when I do, they disappear. I've seen his face in the TV before. It'll flicker to static, and then his face, distorted, twisted, will appear for just a second before it's gone. It's not just what I see. The lights flicker, even when the weather is perfectly clear. Objects move. I'll set something down and find it in a completely different place later. I've even found things I lost years ago suddenly reappearing in the most random spots. And then there are the phone calls. My phone will ring, and when I look at the screen, the number is wrong. Just numbers that don't make sense. Sometimes a single digit, sometimes a long jumbled string of numbers that don't belong in any phone book. If I answer, I hear nothing but static. Other times, I'll hear a voice. It never makes sense, just whispers, fragments of words, before the line cuts off. I don't know why this is happening to me. I don't know why it won't stop. But I do know one thing. He's still here. And I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. Hey everyone. I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. Some people call me a liar. Others tell me I was too young to understand what I saw. But I know what I saw that night. I was 9 years old, and a kid that age doesn't make up something this big. It all started during a family trip to Colorado. We were staying at a new hotel, not even a year old. After dinner, my parents and grandparents joined me downstairs by the pool. My grandparents and dad sat by the edge, watching me swim, while my mom stepped outside to soak in the hot tub. The pool was nothing out of the ordinary, just your average indoor pool. But what stood out were the walls. They were made of large windows, almost like clear plastic, letting you see outside. Except it was late, and the darkness outside reflected the pool's lights, the water, and the chairs back at us. After a while, my dad left with my grandparents to head back to their house. My grandparents went upstairs, and my dad went outside to check on my mom. I was alone by then. I climbed out of the pool, walked over to the windows, and stared at my reflection in the glass. For a moment, all I saw was myself. But then, I saw something else. I leaned in closer, squinting to make sure I wasn't imagining it. There was a man. At first, I thought I might be losing my mind. I blinked and looked around the pool area. It was completely empty. Then I checked a different window, thinking maybe it was someone standing outside. Still nothing. But when I looked back at the first window, there he was. The man wasn't standing in the pool area. He was in the reflection, like he was somewhere far away. He seemed smaller than a regular person, almost transparent, and his figure floated in the air. As I stared, a chill ran through me. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, black shoes, black trousers, and a white blouse-like shirt tucked beneath a black tailcoat. On his head, he wore a top hat. He looked about 40 years old and walked slowly with his head down, almost as if deep in thought. I couldn't take my eyes off him. Then, just as my breath caught, he looked up. He looked directly at me. In that exact moment, my mom opened the back door, and I jumped, startled. "Michelle, are you okay?" she asked, concerned. I nodded quickly, but I didn't tell her what I saw. No one in my family believes in ghosts, and neither do I. Still, the sight of him unsettled me. "Was anyone outside?" I asked her cautiously. "No," she said. "I was the only one out there." I tried to push the image out of my head and tell myself it was nothing. A trick of the light, maybe, but I couldn't. A little while later, I glanced at the window again. He was still there. I panicked and jumped back into the pool, trying to distract myself. Eventually, it was time to leave. My mom and I headed upstairs, but as we did, the fire alarm suddenly went off. Everyone scrambled, thinking there was an emergency. But when we checked, it turned out to be a false alarm. No one had pulled the alarm, and no one could explain how it happened. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. But strangely, it didn't feel threatening. It felt more like a quiet presence, like someone trying to protect me. I don't believe in the paranormal, but something about that night keeps pulling at me. What if the hotel wasn't new, but rebuilt on the same site as an old one? What if long ago there was a fire, and many people died? Maybe the man I saw was one of them, a victim of the fire, staying behind to make sure no one else suffers the same fate. When we first moved into the house in April of 2005, I felt at peace. I loved that house. It had a calmness to it, a warmth that made me think we had found the perfect place. But things changed. By August of the same year, we had moved out, unable to bear what was happening. At first, it was subtle. I would hear the faint cries of children, not often but just enough to notice. Every time, the sound seemed to come from the corner wall on my husband's side of the bedroom. When I followed it, I would sometimes hear tapping on the wall. It was eerie, but I tried to dismiss it. Strangely, the rest of the house felt completely tranquil. It was only in that room, with its persistent coolness, that I felt the chills. Part of me felt an overwhelming urge to help, to comfort the children whose cries I heard. But another part of me was terrified because I didn't know what I was dealing with. For a while, my husband didn't hear them, but eventually he did. That's when everything escalated. One night, my daughter was in the hospital for the third time since we moved in. I still can't forget how the childlike ghost seemed to warn me, pointing toward her room just days before. While I stayed at the hospital, my husband went back to the house alone. He parked in the garage, walked into the house, and immediately heard the cries. He assumed it was coming from the neighbor's kids, but the sound seemed far away yet undeniably inside the house. He followed the sound to the same corner wall I had described before. The next day, when he told me about it, he was visibly shaken. He said he hadn't slept all night and had felt a strange pressure in his head. I believed him because I'd felt the same unease myself. While all this was happening, strange things continued to occur. At the hospital, someone approached us, asking if the abandoned house next to ours was for sale. Oddly, this person turned out to be a medium, and he said the property had drawn him in. He gave my husband a card and returned the next evening, while my husband sat on the balcony reading. This time, the man made a chilling prediction, warning that we should prepare for political changes on the island and consider getting passports. It freaked me out because we had already been thinking about it. Meanwhile, back at the house, the activity persisted. I occasionally saw the figure of a little girl, just watching me, her head slightly down. It didn't always scare me, but there were moments when the unease was undeniable. Once, while cleaning the kitchen after breakfast, I left a clean pot and a fork by the stove. As I stepped out, I heard the distinct sound of the fork hitting the pot. When I returned, everything was exactly where I had left it. To test what I heard, I tapped the fork against the pot. It was the same sound. I couldn't explain it, so I said aloud, "So, you like cream oatmeal?" Because that was the pot I used to make it. It felt like the little girl wanted to communicate. When I told my husband about the incident, he looked startled. Then he told me something that sent a chill through me. He had seen a shadowy figure move into our bedroom while he was finishing his breakfast. He described it as thin, dark, and transparent, simply passing through without looking at him. That was when we decided it was time to leave. The atmosphere in the house had started to affect our relationship, and things between us were getting worse. We planned our move, and I was ready to leave everything behind. On moving day, my eldest daughter was helping me pack when she called out to me. I answered from another room, but when I reached her, her eyes were wide with fear. She said she had seen a figure she thought was me, dressed in black, walking into another room, but it wasn't me. She was so shaken that she refused to step back inside. After we moved most of the furniture and boxes, we returned one last time to clean the house. As soon as I opened the door, an overwhelming sense of unease washed over me. I told my kids to stay outside while I finished cleaning. As I worked, I saw the little girl again, standing quietly, just staring at me. In another part of the house, the shadowy woman appeared, her expression cold and uninviting. Neither spoke, but their presence was unsettling. Still, I focused on cleaning and ignored the persistent tapping sounds from the bedroom wall. When everything was finally done, the house felt eerily peaceful again, like it had when we first moved in. That's when it struck me. The house seemed to lure people in with its calmness before revealing its true nature. Once we moved into our new home, the sense of peace was immediate. Our decision to leave was the right one, and life became normal again. But I'll never forget that house and the others who seemed to live there alongside us.